In court, my wife called me a freeloader. Her lawyer, also her boyfriend, nodded in agreement. Then the judge said, "So an annual income of $570 is still considered freeloading, huh? What? How much?" she gasped. Then her mouth began to stutter. The rain started exactly when she asked for the divorce. I remember because I was looking out our kitchen window, watching the first drops hit the glass, thinking about how I needed to fix that gutter before winter really set in. Claire was across from me at the table, her fingers wrapped around a wine glass she hadn't touched, and I could feel the weight of something unspoken pressing down on the room like a storm front. "We need to talk," she said. Those 4 words, if you've ever heard them in that particular tone, flat, rehearsed, already decided you know exactly what comes next. But I didn't want to know. Not yet. So I looked at her and smiled, even though my chest was tightening, even though some animal part of my brain was already screaming at me to run. "Okay," I said. "What's up?" She didn't smile back. She set down the wine glass with a soft click that sounded too loud in our quiet kitchen, and she said, "I want a divorce, Michael." Just like that. No preamble, no softening. Just those 5 words, delivered with the clinical precision of a surgeon making an incision. The rain picked up outside. I could hear it now, really hear it, drumming against the roof of the house we'd bought together 7 years ago. The house where we'd painted the walls at midnight because we couldn't wait until morning. The house where she'd cried happy tears when we got the keys. The house that suddenly felt like it belonged to a different couple, in a different life, in a different universe, where things like this didn't happen. "I don't understand," I said, which was the truth and also a lie. I understood. On some level, I'd been understanding for months. The late nights at the office, the new clothes, the way she'd started showering as soon as she got home, before she even said hello, the way she looked at her phone like it was a lifeline and I was an anchor. "I'm not happy anymore," she said, and there was something almost bored in her voice, like she was reciting lines from a script she'd memorized but didn't really believe in. "I haven't been happy for a long time." "We can work on it," I said, and I heard the desperation in my own voice. God, I hated that sound. "We can go to counseling. We can—" "I don't want to work on it." She cut me off with the efficiency of someone who'd anticipated this conversation, who'd practiced her responses. "I've made up my mind, Michael. I'm filing for divorce." The room tilted slightly, or maybe I did. I gripped the edge of the table, feeling the smooth wood under my fingers, focusing on that sensation because everything else felt like it was spinning away from me. "Is there someone else?" I asked, even though I knew. Of course I knew. She hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see the calculation in her eyes. The weighing of truth versus convenience versus strategy. "That's not relevant," she said finally, which meant yes. "Who is it?" My voice came out quieter than I intended, smaller. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me," she sighed, like I was being difficult, like I was the one making this harder than it needed to be. "His name is Derek. He's a lawyer. He's going to represent me in the divorce." And there it was, the confirmation, the betrayal wrapped up in such a neat, efficient package that I almost had to admire the audacity of it. She was leaving me for her divorce lawyer, a man who would benefit financially from the dissolution of our marriage, a man who was, at this very moment, probably drafting documents to take apart everything we'd built together. "That's a conflict of interest," I said stupidly, grasping at straws, at anything that might make sense of this. "He says it's fine." She stood up, pushing back her chair with a scrape that made me flinch. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I'll have someone come by for my things this week." "Claire, don't." She held up one hand, and I fell silent. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Just let me go, Michael. Let this be easy." Easy. She wanted this to be easy. She wanted me to smile and nod and sign whatever papers Derek the lawyer drafted up, and then she wanted to ride off into the sunset with her new life, her new man, Her knew everything. While I stayed here in this house that would suddenly be too big and too empty and too full of ghosts. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I watched her walk out of the kitchen, heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the bedroom door close. And then I sat there at the table, alone, listening to the rain, thinking about how quickly a life could end, how all it took was one conversation, one decision, one person deciding that you weren't worth fighting for anymore. The truth is, I'd been preparing for this moment longer than I wanted to admit. Not consciously, not in any way that I could have articulated if you'd asked me that morning. But somewhere deep down, in the part of me that noticed things and filed them away, I'd been collecting evidence, not of her affair, though I had that too, without really meaning to. No, I'd been collecting evidence of something else entirely, something that Claire didn't know about, something that would become very, very important in the months to come. But that night, sitting in our kitchen while she packed her bags upstairs, I wasn't thinking about evidence or strategy or revenge. I was thinking about how we'd met at a coffee shop on a rainy day, not unlike this one. How she'd been reading a book I loved, and I'd worked up the courage to comment on it, and she'd smiled at me like I was the most interesting person in the world. How, for 7 years, I'd believed I was that person to her. I was wrong. The rain kept falling. She left without saying goodbye, and I sat there in the dark, not bothering to turn on the lights, watching the drops slide down the window and thinking about what comes after the end. The next morning, I woke up on the couch. My neck was stiff, my mouth tasted like regret, and for exactly 3 seconds, I forgot what had happened. Then it all came rushing back, a tidal wave of reality that made me want to pull the blanket over my head and pretend the world had stopped existing. But the world doesn't stop. That's the cruel thing about heartbreak. It doesn't pause time. The sun still rises. Your body still demands coffee. The emails still pile up. Life insists on continuing, even when you'd really prefer it didn't. I made coffee. I showered. I went through the motions of being a person because I didn't know what else to do. And then I sat down at my desk in the small office off the living room and stared at my computer screen, trying to remember what normal felt like. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. I spoke to Derek. He'll be sending you the preliminary paperwork this week. Please review it and get your own lawyer. I want this to be fair. Fair? I almost laughed. There was nothing fair about any of this. I typed back, okay. One word. That's all I could manage. One word that meant nothing and everything. That was both surrender and defiance. That was me trying to maintain some shred of dignity in a situation where I felt like I had none. Another text came through almost immediately. I know this is hard, but it's for the best. We want different things. Different things. What did that even mean? I wanted a marriage. I wanted a partner. I wanted someone who wouldn't give up at the first sign of difficulty. But apparently, those were the wrong things to want. I didn't respond to that one. Instead, I opened my laptop and did what I always did when the world felt overwhelming. I focused on work. People think I'm a freeloader. Claire certainly thinks so. I can tell from the way she talks about what I do. That barely concealed dismissal when she explains to her friends at dinner parties that I work from home with just enough emphasis on those words to make them sound like a euphemism for unemployment. The truth is more complicated. It's always more complicated. I'm a software developer. More specifically, I create proprietary algorithms for financial institutions. I develop trading platforms. I build security systems. I solve problems that most people don't even know exist, and I do it from my home office, in my pajamas if I feel like it, on a schedule that makes sense to me and nobody else. I don't have a boss. I don't have an office. I don't wear suits or attend meetings or play corporate politics. I have contracts. I have clients. I have a very specific skill set that very specific people are willing to pay very specific amounts of money for. And I don't talk about it much. Not because I'm secretive or ashamed, but because it's boring. Try explaining blockchain security protocols at a dinner party. Try making cryptocurrency wallet architecture sound interesting to people who think Bitcoin is a scam. You can't. So, I stopped trying. I just smiled and nodded when people asked what I did, gave them the simplified version, computer stuff, and let them make whatever assumptions they wanted. Claire made assumptions. She saw me at home during the day and assumed I was failing. She saw me in casual clothes and assumed I was unmotivated. She compared me to Derek with his three-piece suits and his downtown office and his partnership track, and she found me wanting. What she didn't see, what she never bothered to ask about, was the bank account. The separate account I'd set up 5 years ago at the suggestion of my accountant, who'd told me it was important to keep business finances separate from personal ones. The account where my contract payments were deposited. The account that Claire didn't have access to because, honestly, she'd never asked for it. She assumed the joint checking account, where I deposited enough to cover my half of the bills, was the whole story. She assumed my lack of enthusiasm for her corporate holiday parties meant I was ashamed of my work. She assumed that because I didn't perform success in the way she understood it, I must not be successful at all. She was wrong. But I let her be wrong. I let her think whatever she wanted to think, because correcting her felt like bragging, and bragging felt gross. Besides, I thought she loved me. I thought that was enough. I thought we were a team, and it didn't matter who made what or who did what as long as we were together. I thought a lot of stupid things. Now, sitting at my desk, reading her text about fairness and different things, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger yet, not quite. Something colder, something more calculated. Something that whispered, she wanted a divorce lawyer? Fine. Let her go to court and make her case for why she deserves half of everything we built together. And then let's see what happens when the truth comes out. I opened a new document on my computer, started making a list, account numbers, contract dates, income statements, tax returns, all the boring financial documentation that proved exactly how much of a freeloader I really was. Claire wanted fair? I'd give her fair. I'd give her the truth. And the truth, as it turned out, was worth exactly $570,000 a year. But she didn't know that yet. The rain had stopped. Sunlight was breaking through the clouds, streaming through my office window, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny, indifferent witnesses to the end of my marriage. I looked at my list, looked at the numbers, looked at the evidence of a life Claire had never bothered to understand, and I thought, okay then, if this is how we're doing this, let's do it right. Let's go to court. Let's let her stand up there with her lawyer boyfriend and tell the judge how she carried this marriage on her back. Let's let her paint me as the deadweight, the burden, the man who contributed nothing. And then let's watch what happens when someone asks to see the receipts. Outside, a bird started singing. The world kept turning. And I started preparing for war, disguised as a divorce proceeding, because sometimes the quietest revenge is just telling the truth at exactly the right moment. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just waits. And then, when everyone's watching, it speaks. The law office smelled like expensive leather and broken promises. I sat in the waiting room on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Claire had asked for the divorce, surrounded by mahogany furniture and abstract art that probably cost more than my car. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, something by Bach, I think, though I've never been good with composers. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with perfect posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, had offered me coffee twice. I'd declined both times. My stomach was already churning. This wasn't my first choice of lawyer, or my second, or even my third. My first call had been to a colleague's recommendation, a woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in high-asset divorces. She'd listened to my situation for exactly 7 minutes before telling me she couldn't take my case. Conflict of interest, she'd said. Derek Bradford, Claire's lawyer. Claire's boyfriend was a friend of hers. They'd worked together at a previous firm. She gave me 3 other names and wished me luck with a tone that suggested I'd need it. The second lawyer had been booked solid for 6 months. The third had retired, which brought me here, To the offices of Patricia Reeves? A woman I'd found through an online search and a handful of positive reviews that mentioned words like thorough, strategic, and doesn't back down. She'd had an opening. She'd answered her phone. At this point, that was enough. "Mr. Chen?" The receptionist's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Miss Reeves will see you now." I stood, straightened my tie, one of the 3 I owned, purchased specifically for occasions like this, and followed her down a hallway lined with framed diplomas and awards. Every step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking towards something inevitable and irreversible. Once I walked into that office, once I hired a lawyer and started this process, there was no going back. This became real, final, the end of something that had once been beautiful and was now just evidence. Patricia Reeves stood when I entered her office. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that assessed me in the 3 seconds it took to cross the room and shake her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, the kind of handshake that said she'd been underestimated before and had learned to lead with strength. "Michael," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "Thank you for coming in. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you." She settled back into her chair, pulled out a legal pad, and clicked her pen with the efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. "So, tell me about your marriage." Where do you even start with a question like that? How do you summarize 7 years? The good parts, the bad parts, the in-between parts, where you were just living, just existing, just assuming tomorrow would be like today into a narrative that makes sense to a stranger? "We've been married for 7 years, I said. "Together for 8, met at a coffee shop, got married at a vineyard upstate, no kids. We bought a house together 4 years ago. And 3 weeks ago she told me she wanted a divorce." Patricia nodded, writing something down. "Do you know why she wants the divorce?" "She's having an affair with her lawyer." The pen paused. Patricia looked up, one eyebrow slightly raised. "Her divorce lawyer?" "Yes, his name is Derek Bradford. He works at Morrison, Bradford and Associates downtown." "I know Derek." Her tone was carefully neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Not quite disdain, not quite amusement. Something in between. "He's representing her in this divorce?" "That's what she told me." Patricia set down her pen and leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled under her chin. "That's ethically questionable at best. The Bar Association has rules about lawyers engaging in personal relationships with clients during active representation. It creates a conflict of interest." "Well, that. Can we use that?" I asked. Hope, small and fragile, flickered in my chest. "Possibly. Depends on when the relationship started, whether we can prove it, and whether the judge cares enough to make it an issue. But it's definitely something to keep in our pocket." She picked up her pen again. "Tell me about your assets. What are we looking at in terms of the marital estate?" This was the moment. The moment where I either told her the truth or continued to play the role Claire had written for me. The freeloader. The underachiever. The man who'd been carried through this marriage on his wife's back. "We own the house jointly," I said. "Bought it for $425,000, still owe about $280,000 on the mortgage. Current value is probably around $550,000. We have a joint checking account with maybe $15,000 in it. Joint savings with another $20,000. Her car, my car, both paid off. Standard furniture, appliances, that sort of thing." Patricia nodded, still writing. "And income? What do you both make?" "Claire works in marketing. She's a senior manager at Brightwell Media. Last year she made about $95,000. And you?" I took a breath. Here it was. "I'm a software developer. I work from home. I develop proprietary algorithms and security systems for financial institutions." "Okay, and what's your annual income?" "Last year, it was $570,000. The pen stopped moving. Patricia looked up at me. Really looked at me this time, like she was seeing me for the first time. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?" $570,000, give or take. It varies by year depending on contracts, but I've been consistently in that range for the last 4 years. She set down her pen very carefully, like it might explode if she wasn't gentle. And your wife knows this? She should. We file joint tax returns. My income is right there on the forms she signs every year. But I don't think she's ever actually looked at them. She thinks I make, I don't know, maybe $50,000, $60,000. I never corrected her because I didn't think it mattered. Patricia was staring at me like I'd just told her I was secretly a Russian spy. Michael, you're telling me your wife is filing for divorce? Represented by her boyfriend, who I guarantee is planning to argue that she's entitled to a significant portion of the marital assets because she was the primary earner, and she has no idea that you make 6 times what she makes? That's correct. Have you told Derek? Have you disclosed your income to him? No, he hasn't asked. He sent preliminary paperwork last week requesting basic financial information, but I haven't filled it out yet. That's why I'm here. Patricia leaned forward, and for the first time since I'd entered her office, she smiled. Not a polite professional smile, a real one, the kind that reached her eyes and suggested that she'd just been handed a gift. Michael, do you understand what you're sitting on here? I think so. They're going to walk into court thinking they're fighting a battle where she's the breadwinner and you're, what, a struggling freelancer? A hobbyist? They're going to ask for the house, for spousal support, for her to be made whole after carrying you financially for 7 years. Derek is probably already preparing that narrative. And then we're going to stand up, present your tax returns, and watch their entire case implode. I nodded slowly. That was the plan. That was the quiet, elegant revenge I'd been constructing in my head for 3 weeks. But hearing it said out loud, hearing it confirmed by someone who understood the law and the strategy and the implications, it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Can they argue that I was hiding assets? I asked. That I was somehow deceptive? Were you hiding assets? No. Everything is documented. I have contracts, invoices, bank statements, tax returns. It's all legitimate income, properly reported, properly taxed. I have a separate business account because my accountant recommended it, but it's not hidden. She could have accessed the information anytime she wanted to. Then no, they can't argue deception. They can argue that they didn't know. But ignorance isn't the same as fraud. You didn't hide anything. You just didn't advertise it. Patricia tapped her pen against her legal pad, thinking, here's what I need from you. 5 years of tax returns. Bank statements for all accounts. Joint and individual contracts or invoices documenting your income. Mortgage documents. Car titles. And a list of any other significant assets or debts. Can you get me all of that by the end of the week? I can get it to you today. She blinked. Today? I've been compiling it for 3 weeks. It's all organized, scanned, ready to go. That smile again, wider this time. Michael, I'm starting to like you. Most of my clients can barely find their own tax returns, let alone organize them without being asked. I'm good with documentation. So I'm gathering. She made a few more notes, then looked up at me with an expression that was somewhere between sympathy and calculation. Let me be straight with you about what's going to happen here. When we disclose your income, which we'll have to do during discovery, Claire and Derek are going to panic. They're going to realize that their entire strategy is wrong, that they've completely misunderstood the financial situation, and that you're not just entitled to half the assets, you're potentially entitled to keep most of them because you funded their acquisition. What about spousal support? I asked. Can she ask for that? Patricia laughed. Actually laughed. She can ask, but given that you make 6 times what she makes, no judge is going to award her spousal support. If anything, you'd have a stronger claim, though I don't recommend we go that route. It would look vindictive. I don't want her money, I said quickly. I just want what's fair. Fair is half of the marital assets, Michael. Maybe more, depending on how we argue contribution and investment. Fair is you walking away from this divorce in at least as good a position as you entered it, if not better. She paused, studied my face. But I need to ask, what do you actually want out of this? Beyond fair. Beyond legal. What's your goal? What did I want? I wanted to go back in time. I wanted to stand in that kitchen on that rainy night and say something different, something that would change her mind. I wanted to rewind 7 years and pay more attention. Notice the moment she started pulling away. Fix whatever broke before it shattered completely. I wanted her to love me again. But since none of that was possible, what I wanted was simpler, smaller, more achievable. I want her to know, I said quietly. I want her to understand that she was wrong about me, that I wasn't the deadweight she thought I was, that I contributed, that I mattered. Patricia nodded slowly. We can do that. We can absolutely do that. But Michael, you need to prepare yourself for what comes next. When people realize they've been wrong about something fundamental, they don't usually react well. They get angry. They get defensive. They rewrite history to make themselves the victim. Claire is going to stand in that courtroom and find out that you make over $500,000 a year, and her first reaction isn't going to be embarrassment or apology. It's going to be rage. Let her be angry, I said, and I was surprised by the coldness in my own voice. I've been hurt. Why shouldn't she be angry? Because anger makes people do stupid things, and stupid things make divorces expensive and prolonged. I need to know that you're prepared for this to get ugly. I thought about Claire packing up her things while I was at the grocery store. I thought about her texting me to give her space, to make this easy. I thought about Derek sitting in his downtown office, probably billing her for every sympathetic phone call, every reassuring email, every moment of strategic planning that was built on a foundation of complete ignorance. It's already ugly, I said. We're just making it honest. Patricia held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I'll take your case. My retainer is $5,000, which covers the initial filing and the first phase of discovery. After that, we bill hourly. Given the affair and the income disparity, I think we have a very strong case. I'll draft a response to Derek's initial filing. We'll start the formal discovery process, and we'll see what they do when they realize what they're actually dealing with. She extended her hand across the desk. I shook it, feeling the weight of what I'd just set in motion. This was it, the point of no return. The moment where I stopped being a passive participant in my own life and started fighting back. One more thing, Patricia said as I stood to leave. Don't engage with Claire directly about the divorce. All communication goes through me and Derek now. Don't try to explain yourself. Don't try to make her understand. Don't give her any information that we're not legally obligated to provide. Can you do that? Yes. Good, because the element of surprise is the only real advantage we have right now. Once they know what you make, they'll adjust their strategy. But until then, let them prepare for the wrong fight. Let them get confident. Let them walk into that courtroom thinking they've already won. And then we show them the receipts. I left Patricia's office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not happy. I wasn't sure I remembered what happy felt like anymore, but purposeful, like I was finally doing something instead of just letting things happen to me. The sun was bright outside, one of those crisp October days where the air smells like dying leaves and possibility. I walked to my car, got in, and just sat there for a minute, hands on the steering wheel, breathing. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Derek says you haven't returned the financial disclosure forms. Can you please fill them out? We need to move this forward. I stared at the message for a long time. Thought about all the things I could say, all the accusations I could make, all the hurt I could express, all the truth I could reveal right now, in this moment, through this text. But Patricia's voice echoed in my head. Don't engage. Let them prepare for the wrong fight. I typed back, my lawyer will handle it. 3 words. Clean. Simple. Giving nothing away. Her response came almost immediately. You got a lawyer? Yes. Who? Patricia Reeves. A longer pause this time. I imagined Claire showing the message to Derek. Imagined them looking up Patricia's name, checking her credentials. Maybe feeling the first small flutter of worry that this might not be as straightforward as they'd assumed. Finally. Okay. Have her contact Derek directly then. Will do. I put my phone away and started the car. Drove home through streets that suddenly felt different, charged with potential. The house was still empty when I got there, still full of gaps where Claire used to be, but it felt less like a tomb now, more like a starting point. I went to my office, pulled up the files I'd been organizing, and started the process of sending everything to Patricia. Tax returns, bank statements, contract invoices, every piece of paper that proved I was exactly who I said I was, and nothing like who Claire thought I was. Each document felt like ammunition, like justice, wrapped in PDF format. By the time I finished, the sun was setting. Orange light streamed through my window, painting everything gold. I leaned back in my chair, looked at my computer screen full of sent emails, and allowed myself a small, tight smile. Let them think they knew the story. Let them plan their strategy around a man who didn't exist. Let them walk into court confident and righteous and completely unprepared for the truth. Because in a few months, maybe less, depending on how fast the legal system moved, we'd all be standing in front of a judge, and Derek would be making his case. And Claire would be nodding along, playing the part of the wronged wife who'd supported a freeloader for 7 years. And then Patricia would stand up and say, "Your Honor, we'd like to submit evidence of Mr. Chen's income," and the judge would look at the documents. And Claire's face would go white, and Derek would realize he'd made a very expensive mistake, and I would sit there, quiet and calm, watching justice unfold not with thunder but with whispered numbers on official forms that told the truth when nothing else had. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't need to be. Sometimes all you need is patience, documentation, and the willingness to let people underestimate you right up until the moment it destroys them. The sun finished setting. Darkness filled my office, and I sat there in the shadows, thinking about courtrooms and revelations and the strange, terrible satisfaction of knowing that the truth was on my side, not because I was better than Claire, not because I was morally superior or emotionally stronger or deserving of sympathy, but because I'd simply been honest about who I was, and she'd never bothered to look. And now, finally, everyone would see. The paperwork arrived on a Thursday. I was in my kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang, one of those delivery services that required a signature, the kind that makes everything feel official and ominous. The courier handed me a thick manila envelope. I signed his digital tablet, and then I was alone again with what felt like a small bomb in my hands. From Morrison, Bradford, and Associates. Re Chen V Chen, initial discovery request. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I set it on the kitchen counter and finished making my coffee, performing this small act of normalcy, like it could protect me from whatever was inside. Like if I just went through the motions, grind the beans, heat the water, pour slowly, everything might somehow be okay. It wasn't okay. I knew it wasn't okay the moment I finally opened the envelope and started reading. Derek had been thorough. I'd give him that. The discovery request was 23 pages long, demanding every piece of financial documentation imaginable. Bank statements, credit card records, investment portfolios, retirement accounts, property deeds, car titles, insurance policies. He wanted 5 years of tax returns. He wanted a detailed accounting of every asset and liability. He wanted to know about inheritance, gifts, business interests, cryptocurrency holdings. He wanted everything, and woven through all these demands was a narrative, implicit but unmistakable, of a marriage where Claire had been the responsible one, the provider, the adult in the room, while I had been. What? A drain, a dependent, a man-child who'd coasted on her success while contributing nothing of value. There was a section requesting information about my employment status and income history, phrased in a way that suggested they expected to find very little, maybe a few freelance gigs, maybe some part-time consulting, maybe nothing at all. I read through the entire document twice, my coffee going cold beside me, feeling something dark and sharp crystallize in my chest. This was Derek's opening move. This was him establishing the battlefield, setting the terms, preparing to argue that Claire deserved not just half of everything, but more than half, because she'd earned it while I'd been dead weight. The cruelty wasn't in the legal language. Lawyers always sound cold. That's just how they write, but in the assumptions underneath it, in the way every question implied that I was less than, that I'd failed, that my contributions to our marriage had been negligible at best. I picked up my phone and called Patricia. "I got the discovery request," I said when she answered. "I figured you would. I got mine this morning. He copied me on everything." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "He's fishing, trying to establish a narrative before we counter with the facts. How are you feeling about it?" How was I feeling about it? Like I wanted to drive to Derek's office and throw my tax returns in his face. Like I wanted to call Claire and ask her how she could let someone paint me this way. How she could sit there and nod along while her boyfriend drafted documents that reduced me to nothing. But I didn't say that. Instead, I said, "I'm fine. When do we respond?" "We have 30 days, but I want to move faster than that. The sooner we submit your financial documentation, the sooner they realize what they're actually dealing with. I'll draft our response this week and get it to you for review. In the meantime, I need you to gather everything on their list. Can you do that?" "Most of it I already have. The rest I can get within a few days." "Good. And Michael, don't let this get to you. This is standard procedure. Derek doesn't know what he doesn't know yet. Once he does, the whole tone of this case is going to change." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the discovery request, thinking about perception and reality, and the way people create narratives that serve their purposes. Claire thought I was a freeloader because that made her feel better about leaving. Derek thought I was a freeloader because it made his job easier. They'd constructed this story together, probably over expensive dinners and late-night phone calls, probably in between other intimacies I didn't want to imagine. And in their story, I was the villain, or no worse than the villain. I was the irrelevant character, the extra, the person who could be written out without anyone noticing. They were wrong, and in 30 days or less, I was going to prove it. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of documents and emails, and small, careful acts of preparation. I gathered everything Patricia had requested, organized it into folders, both digital and physical, triple-checked every number and date. My accountant, a pleasant woman named Linda who'd been handling my taxes for 6 years, sent me copies of all my filings along with a letter summarizing my income history. My bank sent statements. My investment advisor sent portfolio summaries. The evidence piled up, literally. I had a whole box of papers sitting in my office, each one a small piece of the truth that would eventually blow up Claire's narrative. During this time, Claire and I didn't speak, not once. All communication went through Patricia and Derek, these sterile emails about scheduling and documentation and logistics. It was strange, this formality. After 7 years of marriage, of waking up together, eating together, sharing space and breath and life, we'd become strangers who required lawyers to mediate our conversations. Sometimes I'd see something funny online and reach for my phone to text her before remembering. Sometimes I'd hear a song we used to love and feel the ghost of her presence beside me. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 in the morning reaching for her side of the bed and finding only cold sheets and absence. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't follow a schedule. It ambushes you in random moments, hits you when you're least prepared, and leaves you gasping in the middle of ordinary days. But I was managing. I was functioning. I was putting one foot in front of the other and doing the work that needed to be done. And then, exactly 18 days after I received Derek's discovery request, Patricia sent me her draft response. I opened the email in my office, late afternoon sun slanting through the windows, and started reading. The first section was standard legal boilerplate acknowledgement of receipt, agreement to provide requested documentation within the specified time frame. Procedural stuff that meant nothing to anyone but lawyers. Then came the second section, the counter-discovery request. Patricia was asking for Claire's financial information too. 5 years of tax returns, bank statements, employment records, everything Derek had asked for from me. And then came the third section, the section that made my heart rate pick up and my hands tighten on my phone. Preliminary financial disclosure, respondent. What followed was a summary, just a summary. not the full documentation yet of my financial situation. Patricia had laid it out in clean, neutral language that somehow made it even more devastating. Respondent is a self-employed software developer specializing in proprietary algorithm development and cybersecurity systems for financial institutions. Respondent maintains an independent business account separate from marital accounts as recommended by his accountant for tax purposes. Respondent's annual income for the past 5 years, 2023, $570,000. 2022, $548,000. 2021, $492,000. 2020, $465,000. 2019, $441,000. Average annual income, 5-year, $503,200. Respondent has maintained consistent employment throughout the marriage and has contributed substantially to the acquisition of marital assets. Full documentation to be provided per discovery timeline. I read it 3 times. Then I called Patricia. "You sent it?" I asked when she picked up. "I'm sending it this afternoon. I wanted you to see it first. Make sure you're comfortable with the disclosure." "I'm comfortable. When Derek reads this, he's going to have a very uncomfortable conversation with his client. And then he's going to recalculate everything he thought he knew about this case. Will he try to argue that I hid the income? He can try. But we have documentation showing separate business accounts set up on accountant's advice. 5 years of joint tax returns, with your income clearly reported. No evidence of deception or concealment. The fact that Claire never looked at her own tax returns isn't your fault or your problem." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. This is really happening. Are you having second thoughts? Was I? Part of me, a small, weak part, that still remembered loving her, wanted to call this off. Wanted to settle quietly, split everything down the middle, let her go without this confrontation. That part of me whispered that revenge was beneath me, that I should be bigger than this, that making her look foolish wouldn't heal my broken heart. But the larger part, the part that had read Derek's discovery request and felt the casual cruelty of being dismissed, diminished, erased, that part wanted justice, not cruelty, not destruction, just the simple, powerful act of being seen accurately. "No second thoughts," I said. "Send it. Done. I'll let you know when I get a response." The response came sooner than I expected. Exactly 4 hours after Patricia sent the disclosure, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Michael." Claire's voice. Tight, controlled, furious. "We need to talk." My first instinct was to hang up. Patricia had been clear. No direct communication. Everything through lawyers. But I was also curious. Curious about what she'd say. Curious about how she'd try to spin this. "I thought we weren't supposed to talk directly," I said. "Forget what we're supposed to do. I just got off the phone with Derek, and he told me." She stopped, took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. "You make $570,000 a year?" There it was. The question. The shock. The moment where reality crashed into her carefully constructed narrative. "Yes," I said simply. "For how long?" 5 years, give or take. It varies by contract." Silence. On the other end of the line, I could hear her breathing, could imagine her in Derek's office, or maybe her apartment, or wherever she was right now, trying to process this information that rewrote everything she thought she knew. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice was different now, smaller, confused. "I did tell you. It's on our tax returns. The forms you sign every April." "I don't read those forms, Michael. You know I don't. I just sign where you tell me to sign." "That's not my fault, Claire." "You let me think." She stopped again, started over. "I thought you made maybe $60,000, maybe $70,000 on a good year. I thought I was the primary breadwinner. You thought I was a freeloader." I finished for her. "You thought I wasn't contributing. You thought you were carrying this marriage financially while I sat around in my pajamas playing on my computer. That's not fair, isn't it? That's what you told Derek, isn't it? That's the narrative you've been building. The poor, successful wife stuck with a deadbeat husband. I never called you a deadbeat. But you thought it. You've been thinking it for years. I could see it in the way you looked at me, the way you talked about my work like it was a hobby, the way you compared me to Derek and found me wanting. This isn't about Derek. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Everything about this divorce is about Derek. You're leaving me for him. He's representing you in court. And he's been preparing a case based on the assumption that I'm broke and you're the hero. How do you think he feels now, knowing that he completely misread the financial situation? Another silence. Then, why didn't you correct me? If you knew I thought you made less, why didn't you tell me the truth? It was a fair question. One I'd been asking myself for weeks. Because I thought you loved me, I said quietly. I thought we were a team. I thought it didn't matter who made what, as long as we were together. I thought you knew me well enough to at least be curious about what I actually did, how my business actually worked. But you never asked, Claire. Not once in 5 years did you ask to see my business accounts, or my contracts, or anything. You just assumed. And I let you assume because I thought we were building something bigger than money. Michael, I have to go, I said. Patricia told me not to talk to you directly, and I've already said too much. If you have questions about the financials, have Derek contact her. Wait. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I felt sick and vindicated and sad all at once. This confusing soup of emotions that made it hard to breathe. She'd called. She'd actually called. And in her voice, I'd heard something I didn't expect. Not anger, exactly. Not even embarrassment. Something more like betrayal. Like I'd deceived her by not correcting her assumptions. Like this was somehow my fault. The audacity was almost impressive. I sat there in my office as the sun set, phone in my hand, replaying the conversation in my head. Wondering if I'd said too much. Wondering if she'd try to use this against me somehow. Wondering what Derek was telling her right now. How he was spinning this development to make himself look less foolish. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Did Claire call you? Yes. Sorry. I answered before I thought about it. What did you tell her? Just confirmed the income figures. Nothing about strategy. Okay, don't answer if she calls again. Derek just emailed me. He wants to talk about settlement. They're scared. I stared at that last word. Scared. Claire and Derek were scared. The people who'd been so confident, so dismissive, so certain of their narrative, they were scared now because the truth had teeth and it was biting them. What do you want to do? I typed back. Let them sweat for a few days. Then we'll talk settlement. But Michael, we're negotiating from a position of strength now. Everything has changed. Everything had changed. I set my phone down and looked around my office. The same office where I'd spent years building a business Claire never bothered to understand. The same office where I'd earned money she never bothered to notice. The same office where I'd sat 3 weeks ago and made the decision to fight back. And now I was winning. Not because I was cruel or vindictive, but because I'd simply told the truth. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes justice is just accuracy. Sometimes revenge is just reality, delivered at exactly the right moment to exactly the right people. I thought about Claire's voice on the phone, the confusion, the betrayal, the way she'd asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" Like I was the one who'd failed here, like my silence had been worse than her assumptions. And I thought about how she'd packed her things while I was gone, how she'd moved in with Derek without looking back, how she'd sent her lawyer boyfriend after me with documents designed to paint me as worthless. And I thought, no, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel bad. I feel like someone who finally stopped letting other people write his story. Outside, night had fallen completely. My office was dark except for the glow of my computer screen. I sat there in the shadows, thinking about courtrooms and confrontations and the moment coming soon now. Maybe just weeks away, when a judge would look at the evidence and ask Claire to explain how an annual income of $570,000 constituted freeloading. And I would sit there quietly while she stammered and stuttered and realized, too late, that she'd never really known me at all. Not because I'd hidden, but because she'd never bothered to look. The truth was patient. It had waited this long. It could wait a little longer. And when it finally spoke, when the numbers were entered into evidence and the judge read them aloud and Claire's face went white with shock, it would speak with a voice like thunder disguised as paperwork. Quiet justice. Elegant revenge. Truth. Finally. Having its day. I smiled in the darkness and started drafting an email to Patricia with everything she'd need for the settlement negotiation. Let them be scared. They should be. The settlement meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at Patricia's office. I woke up that day feeling strange, not nervous, exactly, but alert in a way I hadn't been in weeks. Like my body knew something important was about to happen and had decided to flood my system with adrenaline as preparation. I made coffee. I showered. I put on one of my 3 good suits, the navy one, the one that made me look like someone who belonged in rooms where important decisions were made. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. The man staring back at me had a hardness around his eyes that hadn't been there 2 months ago. A set to his jaw that spoke of decisions made and bridges burned. This wasn't the guy who'd sat at his kitchen table and watched his wife walk away. This was someone else, someone who'd learned to fight back. I arrived at Patricia's office 15 minutes early. She was already there, of course, looking sharp in a gray suit and heels that made soft clicking sounds on the hardwood floor when she walked. She had papers spread across her conference table, copies of our financial disclosures, printed emails, highlighted sections of family law statutes. Ready? She asked as I hung up my coat. As I'll ever be. Remember the strategy. We're here to listen, not to negotiate. Derek is going to try to salvage this. Try to find some angle that makes their initial position make sense. Our job is to let him talk, let him expose how weak his case is, and then we counter with what we actually want, which is the house. Your business accounts remain separate. You keep your retirement investments. Split the joint accounts 50-50. No spousal support either direction. Clean break. That seems fair, I said. Patricia smiled. That's more than fair, Michael. Given the income disparity, we could argue for more. But you told me you want fair, not punitive. So fair is what we're asking for. What do you think they'll ask for? Initially, probably the house, half your business accounts, spousal support, maybe even a share of your future earnings. Derek's going to try to argue that even though you made the money, Claire's support enabled your success, so she deserves a significant portion. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Her support? She didn't even know what I did for a living. Doesn't matter. It's a common argument in high-asset divorces. The idea is that the spouse who makes less still contributed through emotional labor, household management, career sacrificing. She didn't sacrifice her career. She loves her job. I know, which is why the argument won't hold. But Derek's going to try it anyway because it's all he's got left. At exactly 10 o'clock, the receptionist buzzed. They're here. My heart rate picked up. This was it. The first face-to-face since Claire had moved out. The first time I'd see her since everything changed. Since the truth came out. Since the power dynamic shifted so dramatically that Derek was asking for settlement meetings instead of trying to steamroll me in court. Patricia and I walked to the conference room together. She went in first. I followed. And there they were. Derek Bradford looked exactly how I'd imagined. Mid-40s, expensive suit, hair graying at the temples, in that way that's supposed to make men look distinguished. He had the kind of face that smiled easily but never reached his eyes, the kind that had probably charmed dozens of clients and juries over the years. He stood when we entered, extended his hand to Patricia with professional courtesy. Patricia, good to see you. Derek. They shook. Then Derek turned to me, hand still extended. Michael, Derek Bradford, I don't think we've formally met. I looked at his hand, looked at his face, looked at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife while helping her divorce me, who drafted documents designed to paint me as worthless, who'd walked into this situation with the confidence of someone who thought he'd already won. And I left his hand hanging in the air. "No," I said quietly. "We haven't." Derek's smile faltered. He dropped his hand. "Right. Well, shall we sit?" Then I saw Claire. She was sitting at the far end of the conference table, wearing a black dress that I'd bought her last Christmas. Her hair was different, shorter, styled in a way I didn't recognize. She had makeup on, more than usual, like she was going to court or a job interview. When our eyes met, something flickered across her face. Not quite regret, not quite anger, something complicated that I didn't have a name for. I sat down across from her. Patricia sat beside me. Derek took the seat next to Claire, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. A united front, partners in both senses of the word. The silence stretched. Patricia broke it. "Derek, you called this meeting. What are you proposing?" Derek pulled out his own set of papers, arranged them with careful precision. "First, I want to acknowledge that we've received Michael's financial disclosures, and we recognize that they differ significantly from our initial understanding of the marital finances." "Differ significantly," Patricia repeated. "That's one way to put it." My client was not fully aware of the extent of her husband's income. We're still trying to understand why this information wasn't more clearly communicated during the marriage. I started to speak, but Patricia put a hand on my arm. A small gesture, a reminder. Let them talk. "Regardless of the communication issues," Derek continued, "the fact remains that this was a marriage of 7 years. My client contributed to the household, to the relationship, and to creating an environment that allowed Michael to focus on his career. As such, we believe she's entitled to—" "How much?" Patricia interrupted. "Let's skip the rhetoric and get to the numbers. What are you asking for?" Derek glanced at Claire. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "We're requesting the marital home, 50% of all retirement and investment accounts, including Michael's business accounts, and spousal support in the amount of $3,000 per month for a period of 5 years. The number hung in the air like a bad smell. Patricia didn't even blink. "No, no, no. Your client earns $95,000 a year. She doesn't need spousal support. She certainly doesn't need equity in business accounts that she didn't contribute to and didn't even know existed. And the house," Patricia pulled out her own paper, slid it across the table. "The down payment on the house came from Michael's business account. $45,000, we have the wire transfer receipt. Technically, that gives him a larger claim to the property than your client has." I watched Derek's face as he read the document, watched the confidence drain away, replaced by something harder. Calculation. Damage control. "We weren't aware of the source of the down payment," he said carefully. "There's a lot your client wasn't aware of," Patricia said. "That's not our problem. Here's what we're proposing. Michael keeps the house and refinances to buy out Claire's equity. They split the joint accounts 50-50. Both parties keep their individual retirement and investment accounts. No spousal support either direction. Clean break." "That's unacceptable," Derek said. "Claire contributed 7 years to this marriage." "Doing what?" The words came out before I could stop them. Both lawyers looked at me. Claire's eyes went wide. But I couldn't stop now. Months of silence. Months of being painted as less than. Months of watching people make assumptions. It all came pouring out. What exactly did Claire contribute that entitles her to my business accounts? Did she write code? Did she negotiate contracts? Did she spend late nights debugging security protocols? "Michael," Patricia said quietly. A warning, but I kept going. "I'm genuinely asking, Derek. You're sitting here telling me that Claire's environment and support are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in assets. I'm asking you to quantify that. What specifically did she do?" Claire spoke for the first time, her voice tight. "I supported you. I was there for you. You told your friends I was unemployed," I said, looking directly at her. "You compared me to Derek. You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't successful, like I was somehow failing because I worked from home instead of in an office. That's not support, Claire. That's contempt." Her face flushed red. That's not fair. I didn't know. You could have asked. At any point in the last 5 years, you could have asked to see my business accounts, or my contracts, or my tax returns, beyond just signing them. You could have been curious about what I actually did all day. But you weren't. You just assumed. Michael, Patricia said again, firmer this time. Let me handle this. I sat back, jaw clenched, hands fisted under the table where no one could see them shaking. I'd said too much. I knew I'd said too much. But it had felt good, like lancing a wound that had been festering for months. Derek cleared his throat. I think we should take a break. Let everyone cool down. I think we're done, Patricia said. We've made our offer. You can take it back to your client, discuss it, and let us know if you want to accept or if you'd prefer to litigate this in court. But Derek, you know as well as I do that no judge is going to award your client spousal support when she makes nearly 6 figures and my client makes 6 figures times 6. You know they're not going to split his business accounts when she can't prove she contributed to them. And you know that the affair with her lawyer, yes, we know about that, and yes, we'll bring it up if we have to, is going to color how a judge sees her credibility. That's a threat, Derek said. That's a fact. We'd prefer to settle this amicably. We've made a fair offer. The ball is in your court. Derek stood. We'll be in touch. Claire stood too, gathering her purse with shaking hands. She looked at me one more time, and I saw something new in her expression. Not anger, not confusion. Something closer to loss. Like she was finally seeing what she'd thrown away and realizing it was more than she'd bargained for. But it was too late for that. Too late for regret, or second thoughts, or anything that might have mattered 2 months ago. They left. The door closed behind them. And I sat there in the conference room with Patricia, listening to the sound of their footsteps fading down the hallway. You okay? Patricia asked. I don't know. Did I mess that up? Actually, no. You showed emotion, which makes you human. You challenged their narrative, which needed to happen. And you made it clear that you're not going to roll over just because Derek shows up in an expensive suit. She paused. But in future meetings, let me do the talking. There will be future meetings? Maybe. Depends on whether Derek can talk some sense into his client. My guess? They'll counter-offer, we'll counter their counter, and eventually we'll find a middle ground. She started gathering her papers. But Michael? That middle ground is going to be a lot closer to our position than theirs. They know they're not winning this. They're just trying to save face now. I nodded slowly, letting that sink in. How long until we hear from them? Could be days. Could be weeks. Derek needs to explain to Claire why her expectations were unrealistic, which is going to be an uncomfortable conversation. And then he needs to decide if he wants to risk going to trial, where his relationship with his client becomes public record. Would that really matter? The affair? To the case? Probably not. To his reputation? Absolutely. Lawyers who sleep with their divorce clients don't get a lot of referrals. The Bar Association frowns on it. Other lawyers gossip. It's not technically illegal, but it's ethically murky enough that most attorneys avoid it. We walked out together. The receptionist gave me a sympathetic smile as we passed. Outside, the air was cold, late October, turning toward November, that time of year when you can smell winter coming even if you can't see it yet. Patricia paused at her car. Michael, what you said in there about her making you feel not enough? That was real. Hold on to that. Because when this is over, when the paperwork is signed and the assets are divided and you're moving on with your life, you're going to need to remember why you fought. Not for revenge, not for money, but because you deserve to be seen accurately. Thank you, I said, for everything. Thank me when this is over. We've still got work to do. I drove home in a daze, replaying the meeting in my head, Claire's face when I confronted her, Derek's careful lawyer voice trying to spin reality into something that served his purpose, the way Patricia had sliced through his arguments with surgical precision, and underneath it all, the strange, hollow satisfaction of knowing that I'd stood my ground, that I hadn't rolled over. That for maybe the first time in this entire process, I'd been honest about how this felt, instead of polite and accommodating and small. When I got home, I found a text from Marcus waiting for me. How'd it go? I stared at my phone, trying to figure out how to answer that question. How did it go? I'd refused to shake my wife's boyfriend's hand. I'd called her out on 7 years of contempt disguised as support. I'd watched her face crumble as she realized what she'd lost and what she'd miscalculated. It went, I typed back. They wanted the house, my business accounts, and spousal support. Patricia told them no. Hell yes. That's my boy. What did Claire say? Not much. She looked shocked. I think reality is setting in. Good. She should be shocked. She should be horrified. She threw away a good man for some asshole lawyer who's probably going to dump her once this divorce costs him too much in reputation. I smiled despite myself. Marcus had always been protective, always ready to go to war for the people he loved. It was one of the things I valued most about our friendship. I'll keep you posted, I sent. Thanks for checking in. Anytime, brother. Anytime. I set my phone down and looked around my living room. The empty spaces where Claire's things had been were less jarring now. I'd gotten used to them. Or maybe I'd just gotten used to the idea that this was my space now, singular instead of plural, mine instead of ours. The house felt different these days, lighter, emptier, but also more honest. There was no one here performing for me. No one here secretly disappointed in who I was. No one here comparing me to someone else and finding me lacking. Just me. Just silence. Just space to breathe and think and figure out who I was going to be after all this was over. My laptop chimed. An email. From Patricia. Derek just called. They want to counteroffer. Meeting next Thursday. I'll send details tomorrow. So it wasn't over. Not yet. More negotiations. More posturing. More carefully worded arguments about who deserved what and why and how the dissolution of a 7-year marriage could be reduced to asset division and dollar amounts. But I was ready. Or at least, I was more ready than I'd been 2 months ago when Claire had dropped the divorce bomb in our kitchen on a rainy night. I'd learned something in these past weeks, something about myself, about what I was capable of when backed into a corner. I'd learned that I could fight, that I could stand up for myself, that I could look people in the eye and refuse to accept their version of reality when it didn't match the truth. I'd learned that sometimes love isn't enough. That sometimes being a good person, a kind person, a supportive person, sometimes that's not enough to make someone stay. And when they leave, when they walk away, you have a choice. You can curl up and accept their narrative, or you can stand up and tell your own story. I was telling my story, finally, after years of being quiet, of letting assumptions stand, of not correcting people's wrong impressions because it felt like bragging, or because I thought it didn't matter, or because I believed that love transcended money and status and all the superficial markers of success. I was telling my story, and it turned out my story was worth something. It was worth $570,000 a year. It was worth 7 years of code written and problems solved and clients satisfied. It was worth the house I'd helped buy with a down payment Claire didn't know about. It was worth the retirement accounts I'd been quietly funding. It was worth all the late nights and early mornings and weekend work sessions that had built a business she'd never bothered to understand. My story was worth something, and Claire was finally, belatedly, starting to understand that. I made myself dinner. I watched a movie. I went to bed in my too big bed in my too empty house, and I slept better than I had in months. Because I was winning. Not the divorce, though, I was winning that too. But something bigger, something more important. I was winning back myself, the version of me that had gotten lost somewhere in those 7 years. The version that had shrunk to fit Claire's expectations, that had stayed quiet to avoid conflict, that had accepted being diminished because it seemed easier than fighting. That version was gone now, dead, replaced by someone harder, clearer, more certain of his worth. And when this was all over, when the papers were signed and the assets were divided and Claire was living her new life with Derek or whoever came after Derek, I would still be here, still standing, still worth something. Not because of the money. though the money helped. But because I'd finally learned to see myself the way I deserved to be seen, accurately, honestly, without apology. And that, I was beginning to understand, was worth more than any settlement. Thursday came faster than I expected. I spent the intervening days in a strange state of suspended animation, working, eating, sleeping, going through the motions of normal life, while knowing that something significant was building. Like standing on a beach watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. You know the rain is coming. You just don't know exactly when it will hit, or how bad it will be. Patricia called me Wednesday evening to prep. Derek sent over their counteroffer, she said without preamble. It's better than their opening position, but still not reasonable. How much better? They're dropping the spousal support request. They want the house or equivalent buyout, 40% of your business accounts, and they're asking you to cover their legal fees. I laughed. Couldn't help it. They want me to pay for the lawyer she's sleeping with? That's the ask. Obviously, we're going to say no. But Michael, I need you to stay calm tomorrow. I know last week was emotional, and honestly, it worked in our favor. But we can't make that our strategy. Derek is going to try to paint you as volatile, as someone whose anger proves Claire was right to leave. I understand. Do you? Because if you lose your temper tomorrow, if you say something that can be used against you, it could hurt us when we get to court. And we might get to court. Derek is posturing, but he's also a gambler. If he thinks he can win something in front of a judge, he'll try. I'll be calm, I promised. Professional. I'll let you do the talking. This is done non. Good. See you at 10. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of water and stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the darkening sky. November had arrived, with cold rain and bare trees, the world stripping itself down to essentials. Everything felt stark, exposed. Like nature was reflecting what was happening in my life, all the comfortable covering torn away, leaving only the raw truth underneath. I thought about Claire asking me to pay for Derek. The audacity of it. The absolute nerve required to leave your husband for another man, file for divorce, and then ask that husband to fund the very lawyer who was facilitating your departure. It would be funny if it wasn't so insulting. But I'd promised Patricia I'd stay calm. So I breathed. I centered myself. I reminded myself that anger was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. Strategy was what mattered. Control. The long game. By the time I went to bed, I'd managed to find something approaching peace. Or at least resignation. This was happening whether I was ready or not. All I could do was show up and play my part. The second meeting had a different energy than the first. For one thing, Derek seemed tenser, less confident. He'd done his homework now, understood what he was actually dealing with, and the reality had clearly shaken him. He still wore an expensive suit, still had that professional smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something hunted in his expression, like a man who'd realized too late that he'd made a significant miscalculation. Claire looked worse. She'd lost weight, I noticed. Her face was drawn, tired. She wore less makeup this time, or maybe she just stopped caring as much about appearances. When she looked at me, there was something complicated in her eyes. Still anger, yes, but also confusion and what might have been hurt, though I couldn't imagine what she had to feel hurt about. We took the same seats as before. Patricia had her papers organized, her posture relaxed but ready. I sat beside her, hands folded on the table, face neutral. I'd practiced in the mirror that morning. Neutral. Professional. Unreadable. Derek, Patricia began. We've reviewed your counteroffer. Before we respond, I want to make sure I understand your position. You're asking for the house, 40% of Michael's business accounts, and legal fees. Is that correct? That's correct, Derek said. We believe that's a fair compromise given the length of the marriage and Claire's contributions to the household. Fair, Patricia repeated, tasting the word. Let me ask you something, Derek. In your experience, how often do judges award business assets to a spouse who can't demonstrate direct contribution to those business interests? Derek shifted in his seat. Every marriage is different. The law recognizes that both parties contribute in various ways. That's not what I asked. I asked how often it happens, in your practice. Actual cases you've litigated. A pause. Derek glanced at Claire, then back at Patricia. It depends on the circumstances. Let me help you out, Patricia said, pulling out a document. I pulled 5 years of family court decisions in this county involving business asset division. Spousal claims to business accounts succeed in approximately 12% of cases, and only when the non-owning spouse can demonstrate clear, documentable contributions such as bookkeeping, client relations, or business development. Can your client demonstrate any such contributions? Derek's jaw tightened. Claire provided emotional support and maintained the household, which allowed Michael to focus on his work. Did she, though? Patricia looked at me. Michael, who did the grocery shopping in your marriage? We both did, I said. Maybe split 50-50. Who cooked dinner? I cooked more often than she did. She worked late most nights. Who handled the household finances? Paid the bills? I did. Patricia turned back to Derek. So your client worked full-time at her own demanding job, came home late most nights, and didn't actually manage the household in any substantial way. Where exactly is the contribution that entitled her to 40% of Michael's business assets? She was his wife, Claire said suddenly, her voice sharp. Doesn't that count for something? Of course it does, Patricia said, her tone softening slightly. Which is why we're offering you 50% of the actual marital assets, the house equity, the joint accounts, half of everything that was acquired during the marriage through joint effort. But Claire, your husband's business accounts aren't marital assets in the traditional sense. He built that business before you got married. He maintained it independently throughout your marriage. And based on his testimony, you weren't even aware of its value until recently. Because he hid it from me. He filed joint tax returns, Patricia countered. You signed them. Every year. The information was there. You chose not to look at it. I trusted him, Claire said, and there was real emotion in her voice now. Pain. I trusted him to tell me important things. I shouldn't have had to audit our tax returns to know what my husband earned. For the first time in the meeting, I felt something crack in my carefully maintained composure. Because she was right, in a way. She shouldn't have had to audit tax returns. But I also shouldn't have had to spell out my value to someone who claimed to love me. We'd both failed each other. We'd both made assumptions. The difference was, I hadn't left her for someone else, and then tried to take half of what she'd built. Claire, I said quietly, before Patricia could stop me. Did you ever ask? She looked at me. What? Did you ever ask what I made? Did you ever express curiosity about my business, about my clients, about what I did all day, even once? Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. You never wanted to talk about work. Whenever I asked, you changed the subject. I changed the subject because you asked in a way that made it clear you didn't actually care. How was work? Asked while you were scrolling through your phone. Get much done today? In a tone that suggested I probably hadn't. You asked the way people ask, how are you, when they don't want a real answer. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked to see my office, or meet one of my clients, or understand what I was working on? She stared at me, and I could see her cycling through memories, trying to find a counterexample that would prove me wrong. But she couldn't, because it hadn't happened. You made me feel small, I continued, my voice still quiet but gaining strength. For 7 years, you made me feel like what I did wasn't real work. Like because I didn't have an office or a boss or wear suits, I was somehow less than. Less than Derek. Less than your colleagues. Less than the person you thought you deserved. Michael, Patricia said, a warning. But I kept going. And now you're sitting here asking for 40% of the business you never respected, the income you never acknowledged, the success you never even noticed. And you want to know what's fair? What's fair is you getting exactly what you contributed to that business, which is nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. Derek looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't find the words. Patricia's expression was carefully neutral, but I could see approval in her eyes. And Claire looked like I'd slapped her. "I contributed to our marriage," she said finally, her voice small. "You did," I agreed, "and you'll get your share of the marital assets. But my business isn't our marriage, Claire. It's mine. It was always mine. And the fact that you're only interested in it now that you know what it's worth, tells me everything I need to know about what you actually valued in our relationship." Derek cleared his throat. "I think we should take a break." "I think we should make a decision," Patricia said. "We have a clear offer on the table. Michael keeps the house and refinances to buy out Claire's equity, which based on current valuation would be approximately $135,000. They split the joint accounts. Both parties keep their separate accounts and investments. No spousal support either direction. Clean break. Those are the terms. Take them or leave them." "That's significantly less than," Derek started. "Then what? Then you hope to get by misrepresenting the financial situation?" "Derek, you walked into this case thinking your client was the breadwinner. You built your entire strategy around that assumption. You were wrong. Now you're trying to salvage something from the wreckage, and I understand that impulse. But let me be clear. If we go to trial, if you make us present all of this evidence in open court, it's not going to go well for you. Or for Claire." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check. The affair, Derek, your personal relationship with your client, the fact that you've been billing her for pillow talk and calling it legal strategy. You think a judge isn't going to question your objectivity, your ethics? You think the Bar Association isn't going to be interested in a lawyer who started a sexual relationship with a vulnerable client?" Derek's face went white. "Our relationship started after—" "Can you prove that? Because from where I'm sitting, the timeline looks awfully convenient. Claire comes to you for a divorce consultation. Within weeks, she's moved out and into what I'm guessing is your condo downtown. Within a month, you're filing paperwork. The optics aren't great, Derek." I watched Derek process this, watched him realize that Patricia wasn't bluffing, that she'd done her homework, that she was prepared to burn his reputation if necessary to protect her client. Which was me. I was her client. And sitting there, watching her dismantle Derek's case with surgical precision, I felt something close to gratitude. Claire stood suddenly, her chair scraping back. "I need air." She walked out of the conference room without waiting for permission. Derek started to follow, but Patricia held up a hand. "Let her go. You and I need to talk lawyer to lawyer. Michael, would you mind giving us a few minutes?" I nodded, stood, and walked out into the hallway. Through the window at the end of the corridor, I could see Claire outside, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, her arms wrapped around herself against the November cold. Her breath made small clouds in the air. She looked lost, broken. Part of me wanted to go to her, the part that still remembered loving her, that still carried 7 years of habit and affection and shared history, the part that wanted to fix things, to make everything okay, to be the person who made her feel better. But I didn't move, because that wasn't my job anymore. I wasn't her husband. I wasn't her comfort. I wasn't her anything, except the man she decided to leave and then underestimate so severely that she'd walked into a settlement negotiation expecting to walk away with most of my assets. I stood at the window and watched her pace, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite peace, not quite satisfaction, something in between. The acceptance of what was real, what had always been real, stripped of all the comfortable illusions I'd been carrying. She'd never really known me, and I'd let her not know me because I thought love meant not having to explain yourself. But I'd been wrong. Love means being curious. Love means asking questions. Love means actually wanting to understand the person you've chosen to share your life with. We'd never had that. We'd had proximity and routine and a comfortable fiction that we called a relationship. But we'd never had the kind of knowing that survives hard times. The kind of partnership that's built on actually seeing each other. And now, watching her through the window, I realized I didn't want to go back to that. Even if she suddenly changed her mind, even if she walked back in and said she'd made a terrible mistake, I wouldn't take her back. Not because I was angry, though I was. Not because I wanted revenge, though I did, but because I deserved better than someone who'd spent 7 years not bothering to know me. The conference room door opened. Patricia stepped out, alone. "Derek's calling his client," she said. "He's going to recommend they take our offer." "Will she?" "I think so. She's exhausted, Michael, and scared. She's realizing that this isn't going the way she planned, that Derek isn't the knight in shining armor she thought he was, that she's made some very expensive mistakes. She wants this to be over." "So do I said quietly. "I know, but Michael, even if they accept today, it'll still take months for everything to finalize. Court dates, paperwork, waiting periods. You need to prepare yourself for the long haul. I'm prepared." We stood there together, watching Claire through the window. She'd stopped pacing and was just standing now, staring at nothing, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her look. "She's not a bad person," I found myself saying. She made bad choices, and she's going to have to live with them. So will you." "Yeah, but at least I'll live with them honestly, with the truth out there, with everyone finally knowing who I actually am instead of who they assumed I was." Patricia smiled. "That's worth something. It's worth everything." Derek emerged from the conference room, phone in hand. He looked tired, defeated, a man who'd gambled on the wrong horse and was now facing the consequences. "My client needs more time to think," he said. "How much time?" Patricia asked. "A week, maybe 2. This is a big decision, Derek," Patricia said, her voice gentle but firm. "The offer expires in 72 hours. After that, we withdraw it and prepare for trial. Your choice." He nodded slowly. "I'll talk to her." He went outside to where Claire was standing. I watched them through the window, Derek speaking urgently, Claire shaking her head, then nodding, then covering her face with her hands. Whatever he was telling her, she didn't want to hear it, but she needed to. "Come on," Patricia said. "Let's get you out of here. You've done enough for today." We took the back exit, got to our cars without running into them again. And as I drove home through the gray November afternoon, I felt the weight of the past 2 months settling into something manageable, still heavy, still painful, but no longer crushing. I'd stood my ground. I'd told my truth. I'd refused to be diminished. And whether Claire accepted the settlement today, tomorrow, or in 72 hours when the deadline hit, it didn't really matter, because I'd already won the thing that mattered most. Myself, my dignity, my worth. The rest was just paperwork. The 72 hours felt like 72 days. I tried to work, tried to focus on the projects that needed my attention, a security audit for a hedge fund, updates to a trading algorithm, the kind of technical problem solving that usually absorbed me completely. But my mind kept drifting, kept checking my phone, kept wondering what Claire was thinking, what Derek was telling her, whether they'd accept the settlement or roll the dice on a trial. Patricia had warned me that waiting was part of the strategy, that Derek would use every minute of those 72 hours to make Claire understand what she was facing, to show her the case law, the precedents, the grim reality of what would happen if a judge reviewed the evidence and found her claims baseless. "He's going to paint you the worst-case scenario," Patricia had said, walking away with nothing but her car and half of nearly empty joint accounts. Having to pay her own legal fees, which, by the way, are probably already substantial given Derek's hourly rate. Sitting in a courtroom while we lay out exactly how much money her husband was making while she called him a freeloader. Derek knows how to scare a client into accepting a reasonable deal. "And if she doesn't scare?" I'd asked. "Then we go to trial. And we win. But it'll be uglier, more expensive, and more public. For both of you." So I waited, and tried to work, and failed at both. On the second day, Marcus called. "I've been thinking about you," he said. "How's the divorce from hell going?" "It's going. We gave them an ultimatum. They have until tomorrow morning to accept our settlement offer, or we prepare for trial." "What do you think they'll do?" "I don't know. Claire's stubborn, and she's probably feeling cornered. People do stupid things when they feel cornered." "True, but her lawyer isn't stupid. He knows what he's looking at. My money's on them accepting. Maybe. There was a pause. Then Marcus said, "Mike, can I ask you something?" "Sure. How are you really doing? Not the divorce stuff, not the legal strategy. You. How are you holding up?" I looked around my empty living room. The couch, where Claire used to curl up with her laptop. The wall where her paintings used to hang. The bookshelf, with gaps where her books had been. Evidence of absence everywhere I looked. "I'm surviving," I said finally. "Some days are harder than others, but I'm getting through it. You know it's okay to not be okay, right? You don't have to be strong all the time. I know. Do you? Because I've known you for 15 years, and you've always been the guy who handles everything, who keeps it together, no matter what. But this is your marriage ending, man. You're allowed to fall apart a little." I felt something tighten in my throat. If I fall apart, I'm afraid I won't be able to put myself back together. Then fall apart around people who'll help you put yourself back together. That's what friends are for. We talked for another half hour, about nothing important, about his work, his girlfriend, a movie he'd seen, the weather in Seattle, normal things, human things. The kind of conversation that reminds you that life exists outside of divorce proceedings and legal strategies and broken promises. When we hung up, I felt marginally better, still anxious, still waiting, but less alone. The deadline was 9 a.m. Friday morning. I woke up at 6, couldn't fall back asleep, gave up at 6:30 and made coffee, checked my email obsessively. Nothing from Patricia, nothing from anyone. At 7:15, my phone rang. Patricia. "They accepted," she said without preamble. I sat down, heavily, like my legs had suddenly forgotten how to hold me up. "They accepted?" "Derek sent the signed agreement over 20 minutes ago. Claire agreed to all our terms. You keep the house, you refinance to buy out her equity, you split the joint accounts, no spousal support, clean break. It's over, Michael. The hard part, anyway. Now we just have to do the paperwork." What changed? Why did she accept? My guess, Derek showed her the math, showed her what going to trial would cost her emotionally, financially, reputationally, and she realized she couldn't win. Sometimes people need to see it all laid out in black and white before they can accept reality. I was quiet for a moment, letting it sink in. Over. The negotiation was over. The fighting was over. All that remained was paperwork and waiting for courts to process everything, and one day, maybe 6 months from now, I'd receive a document that said my marriage was officially dissolved. "Michael? You still there?" "Yeah, sorry. I'm just processing." "Take your time. This is a big moment. You should feel it." "I don't know what I feel. That's normal. You've been in fight mode for so long that now that the fight is over, your system doesn't know what to do with itself. Give yourself some time. And Michael, you did good. You stood your ground, you told your truth, and you came out of this with your dignity intact. That's more than a lot of people can say after a divorce." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, coffee going cold in my hands, staring at nothing. It was over. The woman I'd loved for 7 years, the woman I'd married on a beautiful October day at a vineyard upstate, the woman who'd cried when we got the keys to this house, the woman who'd promised to love me in sickness and health, for better or worse, until death did us part, had signed papers agreeing to dissolve our marriage for $135,000 and half of whatever was in our joint accounts. That's what 7 years amounted to. A dollar figure and a signature. I should have felt victorious. I'd won, after all. I'd protected my assets, proven my worth, forced everyone to see me accurately. I'd done everything I set out to do. But sitting there in my kitchen, watching the morning light stream through the window, all I felt was tired. Tired and sad and oddly empty. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that now that I'd put it down, I didn't know what to do with my hands. I called my mom that afternoon. She'd known about the divorce, of course. I'd told her back in September, had endured her questions and concerns, and the particular kind of motherly worry that makes you feel both comforted and guilty at the same time. but I hadn't told her about the financial revelation, about Claire's assumptions, about the settlement negotiations. I'd kept it vague, generic. We're working it out. It'll be fine. Michael, she said when she answered, that particular tone mothers have when they know something's wrong. How are you? The divorce is finalized, I said. Well, the settlement is. The actual divorce will take a few more months to process, but the hard part is done. Silence. Then, how do you feel? I don't know, Mom. I really don't know. Did you get a fair settlement? More than fair. I kept the house, kept my business accounts. She got her equity and walked away. No alimony, no ongoing obligations. Clean break. That's good. Another pause. So, why do you sound so sad? Leave it to mothers to cut through all the bullshit and get right to the heart of things. Because it's over, I said. Really over. And I know it's what needed to happen. I know it's better this way. But there's still a part of me that wanted, I don't know, a different ending. An ending where we figured it out. Where she stayed. Where we were enough for each other. Oh, sweetheart. Her voice went soft. Love doesn't always work out the way we want it to. Sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes they make choices we don't understand. But that doesn't mean what you had wasn't real or that it didn't matter. She never knew me, Mom. She spent 7 years with me and never bothered to really know who I was. Maybe. Or maybe she knew and just didn't value it the way she should have. But Michael, that's not a reflection on you. That's about her. About what she was capable of seeing. You can't make someone appreciate you if they're determined to see you as less than you are. We talked for an hour. She told me about her garden, about my sister's kids, about the neighbor's dog that kept digging up her tomatoes. Normal things. Life things. The conversation was a gift, a reminder that the world was bigger than my divorce, that life continued, that there were still tomatoes to plant and grandchildren to love and neighbors to complain about. When we hung up, I felt more grounded, still sad, still processing, but less alone in it. The weekend passed in a blur of small, necessary tasks. I cleaned the house. Really cleaned it. The kind of deep clean you do when you're trying to exorcise ghosts. I scrubbed floors and washed windows and moved furniture around until the space felt different enough that I could imagine living in it alone without constantly being reminded of who used to live there with me. I went through closets and drawers, found things Claire had left behind. A sweater, a book, a pair of earrings, small artifacts of a life that no longer existed. I put them in a box, texted her that she could pick them up whenever she wanted, received a one-word reply, thanks. One word. That's what we'd become. People who communicated in single words through text messages because anything more felt dangerous or painful or pointless. I started making plans. Not big plans, I wasn't ready for that yet, but small ones. I'd refinance the house. I'd take a vacation somewhere warm. I'd maybe, eventually, think about dating again, though the idea felt surreal and vaguely nauseating. Mostly, I tried to imagine a future that didn't include Claire, a future where I was just me, singular, independent, accountable only to myself. It was harder than I expected. 7 years of habit don't disappear overnight. I still reached for my phone to text her funny things. Still set out 2 coffee cups in the morning before remembering. Still listened for her key in the lock. The ghost of a marriage haunts differently than the ghost of a person. It's not dramatic, it's just there, in small moments, in muscle memory, in the shape of your days that suddenly has a Claire-sized hole in it. But I was adjusting, slowly, painfully, but adjusting. On Monday morning, Patricia called with logistics. Derek filed the formal settlement agreement with the court this morning. We need to start the refinancing process so you can buy out Claire's equity. I'm going to send you some lender recommendations. Also, we need to schedule a final meeting to sign all the dissolution paperwork. Once that's done, we submit it to the judge, and then it's just a waiting game. How long? 4 to 6 months typically. Could be faster if the courts aren't backed up. Could be slower if they are. But Michael, from a practical standpoint, It's over. You're separated. You've divided assets. All that's left is making it official. Okay. How are you doing? Really? I'm okay. Tired, but okay. That's normal. Divorce is exhausting, even when it goes relatively smoothly. Take care of yourself. And Michael, I'm proud of what you did here. You handled this with a lot of grace, considering the circumstances. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you. That's what I'm here for. I'll send over those lender recommendations, and we'll be in touch about scheduling that final meeting. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and pulled up my banking information. Started running numbers. The refinance would be expensive but manageable. I'd write Claire a check for $135,000. She'd sign over her half of the house, and that would be that. The house would be fully mine. The mortgage would be fully mine. The responsibility, the maintenance, the memories, all mine. It felt strange, surreal, like I was playing a part in someone else's life. But this was my life now. Had been for months, really. Even if I was only just accepting it. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I went out. Not anywhere special. Just a bar downtown where I used to meet Marcus before he moved to Seattle. A place with good beer and terrible lighting, and music just loud enough to discourage deep conversation. I sat at the bar, ordered an IPA, and watched sports highlights on the TV mounted in the corner. A woman sat down 2 seats away. Mid-30s, blonde hair, tired eyes. She ordered wine and pulled out her phone, the universal signal for "leave me alone." We sat in parallel silence for 20 minutes. Then she spoke. Bad day? I looked over. What makes you say that? You've been staring at that TV for 20 minutes, and I don't think you've actually seen any of it. I laughed, despite myself. That obvious? Takes one to know one. She raised her wine glass in a mock toast. Bad breakup? Divorce, actually. Just finalized the settlement this morning. Ouch. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's for the best. That's what everyone says. But nobody ever means it. She was right. I didn't mean it. It was true it was for the best, but that didn't make it hurt less. Sarah, she said, extending her hand. Michael. We shook. Talked for a while. She was going through her own divorce. 3 years married. No kids. Husband decided he wanted to find himself, which apparently meant moving to Colorado and becoming a ski instructor. We traded war stories, commiserated, laughed at the absurdity of it all. When I left an hour later, we exchanged numbers, though I suspected neither of us would actually use them. It wasn't about that. It was about 2 strangers finding each other in a bar and reminding each other that life goes on, that other people survive this, that you can sit at a bar and laugh and be human even when your life feels like it's been torn apart and hastily taped back together. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in days. The house was still empty. My bed was still too big. Tomorrow would still come with all its challenges and adjustments and small moments of grief. But I'd survived today. I'd finalized a settlement that protected my interests. I'd called my mom. I'd cleaned my house. I'd sat at a bar and had a normal conversation with a stranger. Small victories, but they added up. And sitting in my driveway, looking at my house lit up against the dark November sky, I realized something. I was going to be okay. Not today, probably not tomorrow, but eventually. The hardest part, the fighting, the negotiating, the forcing people to see me accurately, that was done. What remained was simpler, sadder, but simpler. Grief, adjustment, rebuilding. And maybe, somewhere down the line, forgiveness. Not for Claire, not yet, maybe not ever, but for myself. For staying too long in a relationship where I wasn't seen, for not demanding more, for accepting less than I deserved because I thought that's what love looked like. I'd learned better now. And the man who walked into that house alone, tired, but standing, was wiser than the one who'd walked out of his marriage 2 months ago. Wiser, stronger, and finally ready to let go. The settlement was signed. The next chapter was beginning. And for the first time in months, I was ready to see where it led. The call came 3 weeks later. I was working, actually working this time. not just staring at my computer while my mind wandered when my phone rang. Patricia's name on the screen. I answered immediately. "Michael, we have a problem." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Claire is contesting the settlement." I stood up from my desk so fast my chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "What? She signed it. She agreed to everything. How can she contest it now?" "Derek filed a motion this morning claiming the settlement was signed under duress, that he provided inadequate counsel, and that Claire wasn't fully informed of her rights. He's arguing that the income disclosure was intentionally delayed and that his client didn't have adequate time to understand the financial implications." "That's bullshit. We gave them 72 hours. They had all the information. They signed willingly." "I know, and we're going to fight this. But Michael, I need you to understand what's happening here. This is Derek trying to save face. He screwed up, he walked into this case with bad assumptions, he gave his client bad advice, and now she's probably threatening to file a complaint with the Bar Association unless he fixes it. So he's throwing a Hail Mary. Can he do that? Can he just take back a signed agreement?" "He can try. Whether he succeeds depends on the judge. We have a hearing scheduled for next Thursday. Derek has to prove his claims, and we get to present our evidence that everything was done properly. That Claire had adequate representation, bad representation, but adequate, and that she signed of her own free will." I sat back down, put my head in my hands. "So we're going to court after all." "Looks that way. But Michael, this isn't the trial we prepared for. This is just a hearing on the motion to vacate the settlement. If the judge denies Derek's motion, which I think he will, the settlement stands and we're done. If he grants it, we go back to negotiation or proceed to a full trial." "What are the odds?" "In our favor? I'd say 70-30. Maybe 60-40. Judges don't like it when lawyers try to undo settlements because they gave bad advice. But Derek's going to argue that you intentionally withheld financial information, that the power imbalance was too significant, that Claire deserves a second chance to negotiate fairly." "I didn't withhold anything." "I know. We have the paper trail to prove it. But Derek's going to try to spin it differently. He's going to make you look like you were playing games, hiding assets, manipulating the situation. So what do? We prepare. We organize every piece of evidence that shows when you disclosed what, when they had access to information, every email, every document request. And you prepare to testify. Testify? The judge might want to hear from you directly, might want to ask you questions about your income, your business, why you kept separate accounts, when you told Claire about the money. You need to be ready to answer honestly and clearly." I took a deep breath, let it out slowly. "Okay, I can do that." "Good. I'll send over everything you need to review. And Michael, try not to stress too much. We have a strong case." Derek's grasping at straws. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at nothing. Just when I thought it was over, just when I'd started to adjust, to move forward, to imagine a life beyond this divorce, it pulled me back in. And the worst part was knowing that Claire was doing this, that she'd signed an agreement, accepted the terms, and then changed her mind. Or maybe Derek had changed it for her. Maybe he'd realized how badly he'd messed up and convinced her to go along with this motion to save his own reputation. Either way, it felt like betrayal all over again. Like I couldn't trust anything, couldn't believe any ending, couldn't ever really be done with this. I picked up my phone, almost called Claire, almost broke Patricia's rules about direct contact because I wanted to ask her, why? Why can't you just let this be over? Why are you making this harder than it needs to be? But I didn't call. Instead, I opened my laptop and started reviewing every document, every email, every piece of communication from the past 4 months. If Derek wanted a fight, I'd give him one. If he wanted to argue I'd been deceptive, I'd bury him in evidence proving otherwise. The truth was still the truth, and this time it would be spoken in a courtroom in front of a judge where it really mattered. The week before the hearing, I barely slept. Patricia had sent me a massive file of documents to review: correspondence, financial disclosures, timeline summaries, everything that proved our case. I read through it all multiple times, memorizing dates and details, preparing for questions I might be asked. She also sent me Derek's motion. I read it with a growing sense of anger. According to Derek's version of events, I had systematically concealed my income throughout the marriage. I had manipulated the financial situation to keep Claire dependent and uninformed. I had strategically delayed disclosure of my business accounts until it was too late for her to properly evaluate her options. The settlement had been signed under extreme emotional distress and inadequate legal counsel. Every line was a distortion. Every argument was built on implications and suggestions rather than facts. Derek was painting a picture of a calculated predator and a victimized wife, when the reality was so much simpler. I'd worked. I'd earned money. I'd filed tax returns, and Claire had never bothered to look. But Derek was good at what he did. I had to give him that. He'd taken a story where his client was clearly wrong and found a way to make her look sympathetic. Found a way to shift blame onto me for his own failures. Marcus called the night before the hearing. "Big day tomorrow," he said. "Yeah. You ready?" "I think so. Patricia's prepared me as much as possible. I know what to say, what not to say. I hate that we're here. I hate that this isn't over." "I know, man. But look at it this way. After tomorrow, it really will be over, one way or another. Either the judge tells Derek to pound sand and the settlement stands, or you go back to negotiation with everyone's cards on the table. But this limbo you've been in, that ends tomorrow." "I hope so." "It will. And Mike, you've got this. You're not the same guy who got blindsided in his kitchen 4 months ago. You're stronger now. You know your worth. Let that come through tomorrow." After we hung up, I tried to sleep. Managed maybe 3 hours. Spent the rest of the night lying in bed, watching shadows move across the ceiling, running through potential questions and answers in my head. When morning finally came, I felt exhausted but strangely calm, like I'd moved beyond nervousness into some kind of Zen acceptance. This was happening. I couldn't stop it. All I could do was show up and tell the truth. So that's what I'd do. The courthouse was exactly what you'd imagine: marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of institutional architecture designed to make you feel small and intimidated. Patricia met me outside the courtroom at 8:30. She wore a sharp black suit and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." "Remember, answer the questions asked. Don't volunteer extra information. Don't get emotional. Don't engage with Derek directly. Just focus on the judge." "Got it." We walked into the courtroom together. It was smaller than I expected, maybe 20 feet by 30, with wooden benches, a judge's bench at the front, tables for the lawyers. Derek was already there, setting up his materials. And beside him, wearing a gray dress and looking pale, was Claire. Our eyes met for a second. She looked away first. We took our seats at the opposite table. Patricia organized her files with precise movements. I sat perfectly still, hands folded, trying to look calm even though my heart was racing. At exactly 9 o'clock, a door opened and the bailiff said, "All rise." Judge Rebecca Martinez entered, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and was impressed by nothing. We all stood. She took her seat. We sat. "Let's begin," she said, looking at Derek. "Mr. Bradford, this is your motion. Make your case." Derek stood, buttoned his jacket, and launched into his argument. He was good. I had to admit it. He spoke with confidence and conviction, painting a picture of a vulnerable woman who'd been kept in the dark about her husband's finances, who'd signed a settlement agreement without fully understanding what she was giving up, who deserved a second chance to negotiate fairly. He talked about the extreme income disparity and the significant power imbalance it created. He suggested that I'd kept separate business accounts, specifically to hide my income from Claire. He implied that the 72-hour deadline had been unnecessarily aggressive, designed to pressure his client into accepting before she could properly evaluate her options. "Your Honor," he concluded, My client entered into this settlement agreement based on incomplete information and inadequate counsel. She trusted her husband to be transparent, and she trusted me to protect her interests. Both of us failed her. She deserves the opportunity to remedy that failure." Judge Martinez looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Bradford, are you arguing that you provided inadequate counsel to your own client?" "I'm arguing that I didn't have complete information, Your Honor. Had I known the full extent of Mr. Chen's income earlier in the process, I would have advised my client differently." "And whose fault is it that you didn't have complete information earlier?" Derek hesitated. The respondent delayed financial disclosure. "Did he refuse discovery requests?" "No, Your Honor." "But did he fail to provide requested documentation within the specified time frame?" "No, but the timeline." "So he complied with all discovery requirements, provided all requested information, and your client signed a settlement agreement after reviewing that information. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor, but my client was under emotional distress." "Mr. Bradford, everyone going through a divorce is under emotional distress. That's not grounds to vacate a settlement agreement." The judge turned to Patricia. "Miss Reeves, your response." Patricia stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. The respondent provided complete and accurate financial disclosure as soon as it was requested. We have documentation showing that Mr. Fidio disclosed Chen filed joint tax returns throughout the marriage, with his income clearly reported. Mrs. Chen signed those returns. She had access to that information but chose not to review it. She pulled out a document. This is a timeline of all financial disclosures in this case. Mr. Chen received the initial discovery request on October 15th. He provided complete financial documentation on October 28th, well within the 30-day requirement. Mr. Bradford and his client had that information for 17 days before signing the settlement agreement. That's more than adequate time to review and evaluate." "Your Honor," Derek interrupted, "the complexity of the financial information—" "Mr. Bradford, you're a divorce attorney. Reviewing financial information is literally your job." Judge Martinez looked at the papers in front of her. "Miss Reeves, I want to hear from your client. Mr. Chen, please approach." My heart jumped. Patricia nodded at me. I stood and walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, sat down. The judge looked at me with those sharp, assessing eyes. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to ask you some direct questions, and I want direct answers. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "During your marriage, did you intentionally hide your income from your wife?" "No, Your Honor. We filed joint tax returns every year. My income was reported on those returns. Claire Mrs. Chen signed them." "Did she know what she was signing?" I don't know, Your Honor." "I assumed she did. I never tried to hide it from her. She just never asked about the specifics." "Why did you maintain separate business accounts?" "On the advice of my accountant, she recommended keeping business finances separate from personal finances for tax purposes. It's a common practice for self-employed individuals." "Did your wife have access to information about those accounts?" "She never asked for access, Your Honor, but I would have provided it if she had." Judge Martinez leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Chen, I'm trying to understand something. You make over $500,000 a year, and your wife thought you made what, 50,000? 60,000? Something like that, Your Honor. And in 7 years of marriage, this never came up? You never corrected her?" This was the question I'd been dreading. The one that made me look either deceptive or pathetic. "Your Honor, my wife. She never seemed interested in what I did. She worked in marketing, had a career she was passionate about. When people asked what I did, she'd say computer stuff in a way that suggested it wasn't important. I tried to talk about my work a few times, but she'd change the subject or look bored. So I stopped trying. I thought it didn't matter. I thought we were building a life together, and who made what wasn't important as long as we were happy." "Were you happy?" The question caught me off guard. "I thought I was, Your Honor. But looking back, I don't think either of us was. We were just existing together, going through the motions." Judge Martinez was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you, Mr. Chen. You can step down." I returned to my seat. Patricia gave me a small nod. "Good job." The judge looked at Derek. "Mr. Bradford, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. When did your personal relationship with Mrs. Chen begin?" Derek's face went white. Claire's went red. They looked at each other. "Your Honor, I don't see how that's relevant." "Answer the question, Mr. Bradford." Our relationship developed during the course of the representation. Before or after she signed the settlement agreement? A long pause. Then, before. "I see. And you don't think that might have affected your judgment, your ability to provide objective legal counsel?" "I did my best to maintain professional boundaries. Your best wasn't good enough." Judge Martinez closed the file in front of her. "Here's what I see, Mr. Bradford. I see a lawyer who entered into a personal relationship with his client, gave her bad advice based on incomplete assumptions, and is now trying to undo a valid settlement agreement to cover his own mistakes. I see a client who signed a document after having 17 days to review detailed financial information that was always available to her but that she chose to ignore. And I see a respondent who complied fully with discovery, who answered questions honestly, and who doesn't deserve to be dragged back through this process because opposing counsel was incompetent." She opened her folder, wrote something. "Motion denied. The settlement agreement stands as written. Mr. Litter, Bradford. I strongly suggest you discuss with your client whether she wants to continue being represented by someone whose judgment is this compromised. We're adjourned." The gavel came down. And just like that, it was over. Derek stood there, mouth slightly open, looking like he'd been punched. Claire's face was in her hands. Patricia was gathering her papers with a satisfied smile. I just sat there, letting it sink in. The judge had seen through Derek's bullshit, had understood what really happened, had validated everything I'd been saying for months. It was over. Really, truly over. Patricia touched my arm. "Come on, let's get out of here." We walked out of the courtroom together. In the hallway, she turned to me and smiled. "Well, that went better than expected. Did you know she'd ask about the affair?" "I hoped she would. Judges don't like lawyers who mix personal and professional. Derek handed us that gift." "So, what happens now?" "Now, nothing. The settlement stands. Claire gets her check, you get your house, and, in a few months, you get your divorce decree. It's done, Michael. Congratulations." I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relieved. And I did, sort of. But mostly, I just felt tired. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "You're welcome. You were a good client. Honest, prepared, reasonable, made my job easy." She paused. "What will you do now?" I looked out the courthouse windows at the December sky, gray and heavy with impending snow. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe take that vacation. Maybe just breathe for a while. Figure out who I am without all this." "That sounds like a good plan." We shook hands. She left, and I stood there in the courthouse hallway, alone, feeling the weight of 4 months finally lifting off my shoulders. It was over. The fighting, the negotiations, the motion to vacate, all of it, over. And tomorrow, I'd start figuring out what came next. But today, I just wanted to go home. I thought it was over. I really did. After Judge Martinez denied Derek's motion, after Patricia told me the settlement was final, after I'd walked out of that courthouse feeling like I'd been released from prison, I thought I was done. I was wrong. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks before Christmas. I was shopping for gifts online, something for my mom, something for Marcus when my phone rang. Patricia's name. Again. "Please tell me this is good news," I said when I answered. "I wish I could." Claire filed an appeal. I closed my laptop, pressed my fingers against my temples. An appeal of what? The judge already ruled. She's appealing the denial of the motion to vacate. She's arguing that Judge Martinez was biased, that she didn't properly consider the evidence of inadequate counsel and financial manipulation. It's a long shot, but Derek convinced her to try. Of course he did. He's trying to save his reputation. That's my read too. But Michael, here's the thing. Appeals take time. This could drag out for another 6 months, maybe longer. And there's a small chance, very small, that an appeals court could overturn Martinez's decision and send us back to renegotiation. I felt something break inside me. Not dramatically, just a quiet snap, like a rubber band stretched too far, finally giving way. I can't do this anymore, I said. I can't keep fighting the same fight over and over. I just want it to be done. I know, and I'm sorry, but we don't have a choice. We have to respond to the appeal. We have to present our case again. The good news is we have all the same evidence, all the same arguments. We're just presenting them to a different court. When? Oral arguments are scheduled for January 15th. That's when we'll stand in front of a 3-judge panel and explain why Judge Martinez was right. It's not a full trial. It's more like a hearing. Both sides present their arguments, the judges ask questions, and then they deliberate. And if they side with Claire, then we go back to square one. But Michael, I don't think that's going to happen. Appeals courts generally defer to the original judge unless there's clear evidence of error. We have a strong case. Try not to worry too much. Try not to worry. Right. After we hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, watching the December light fade through my windows. Christmas decorations were going up in neighbors' yards, lights, wreaths, inflatable Santas. The world was preparing for joy and celebration, while I was preparing for another round of legal combat. I called Marcus. She appealed, I said when he answered. Jesus Christ. When does it end? Patricia says January. Oral arguments in front of a 3-judge panel. Can't you just, I don't know, settle again? Give her some money to make this go away? I could, but Marcus, if I do that, she wins. She learns that if she just keeps fighting, keeps appealing, keeps dragging this out, eventually I'll get tired and give her what she wants. I can't set that precedent. So what are you going to do? Fight. Again. What choice do I have? We talked for a while longer. Marcus tried to cheer me up, told me about his Christmas plans, made jokes about Derek probably writing his appeal while Claire was in the shower. It helped, marginally. At least I knew someone was on my side. After we hung up, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened a bottle of the good whiskey, the stuff I'd been saving, and I poured myself 3 fingers. Then I sat on my couch and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The exhaustion, the anger, the deep, bone-tired frustration of fighting someone who refused to accept reality, the hurt of knowing that Claire hated losing more than she'd ever loved me. I drank, I felt, and then I went to bed and slept for 12 hours straight. Christmas came and went. I spent it with my mom, who fussed over me and fed me too much food and carefully avoided asking about the divorce. It was nice, normal, a brief respite from the legal nightmare. But January came roaring in with cold and snow and the approaching date of oral arguments. Patricia sent me materials to review transcripts from the previous hearing, legal briefs, case law about settlement agreements, and appeals. I read it all, trying to understand the arguments Derek would make, the angles he'd try to exploit. The night before the arguments, Patricia called with final instructions. This is different from the previous hearing, she said. The judges have already reviewed all the evidence. Tomorrow is about explaining why Judge Martinez made the right call. I'll do most of the talking, but they might ask you questions. If they do, answer simply and directly. Don't elaborate unless they ask for more detail. What kind of questions? Probably the same ones, Martinez asked. Why you kept separate accounts? Whether you tried to tell Claire about your income? Whether you think the settlement is fair? Just be honest. That's served us well so far. Okay. And Michael? Try to get some sleep. You need to be sharp tomorrow. I didn't sleep. Not really. I dozed off around 3 a.m. and woke up at 6, feeling fuzzy and anxious. Showered, put on my best suit, drank too much coffee, drove to the courthouse with my stomach in knots. The appeals court was in a different building, more modern, less intimidating than the family court where we'd been before. Patricia met me outside at 8:30. She looked calm, professional, ready for battle. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I want this to be over." "Soon. One way or another, this will be resolved soon." We went through security, took the elevator to the 4th floor, found the courtroom. It was larger than Martinez's courtroom, more formal, with 3 chairs behind the judge's bench instead of 1. Derek and Claire were already there, sitting at their table, not looking at each other. Trouble in paradise, I thought with grim satisfaction. At exactly 9 o'clock, a bailiff announced, "All rise for the Honorable Judges Castellano, Hughes, and Park." 3 judges entered: an older white man, a middle-aged black woman, and a younger Asian man. They took their seats. We sat. Judge Castellano, in the center, spoke first.
"We've reviewed the record. Mr. Bradford, you're appealing Judge Martinez's denial of your motion to vacate the settlement agreement.
Present your argument." Derek stood. He looked tired. The confident swagger from earlier hearings was gone, replaced by something more desperate. He knew he was losing. He just couldn't accept it. "Your Honors, this case involves a fundamental unfairness. My client entered into a settlement agreement without full knowledge of the financial situation. The respondent maintained separate business accounts that my client wasn't aware of. When she discovered the true extent of his income, she was shocked." "Mr. Bradford," Judge Hughes interrupted, "your client signed joint tax returns for 5 years. The income was reported on those returns. How is that maintaining separate accounts in any deceptive sense?" "Your Honor, my client trusted her husband to communicate important financial information. She shouldn't have had to audit tax returns to understand what he earned." "That's not a legal argument," Judge Park said. "That's a relationship issue. We're concerned with whether proper legal procedures were followed. Were they?" Derek hesitated. "The disclosure came late in the process." "Did it come within the required time frame?" Judge Castellano asked. "Yes. But then it wasn't late. It was timely. Continue." Derek pushed forward, making the same arguments he'd made before. Inadequate counsel, emotional distress, power imbalance. The judges listened with expressions that ranged from skeptical to bored. When he finished, Judge Castellano turned to Patricia. "Miss Reeves?" Patricia stood. "Your Honors, this appeal is without merit. Judge Martinez correctly found that all legal procedures were followed, all information was properly disclosed, and the settlement agreement was signed freely and knowingly. Mr. Bradford is essentially asking you to overturn a valid agreement because he gave bad advice to his client. That's not grounds for reversal. The relationship between Mr. Bradford and his client," Judge Hughes said. Judge Martinez made note of it. "When did that relationship begin?" "During the representation, Your Honor. Mr. Bradford admitted as much in the hearing." "And you're arguing that affected his judgment?" "I'm arguing it's one of many factors that suggest his motion to vacate was filed in bad faith. He made errors. His client is unhappy. Rather than accept responsibility, he's trying to undo a settlement that was negotiated fairly and properly." Judge Park leaned forward. "Miss Reeves, let me ask you something. Your client makes over $500,000 a year. His wife thought he made a fraction of that. You don't see any problem with that level of miscommunication in a marriage? With respect, Your Honor, that's not a legal problem. That's a communication problem. My client filed joint tax returns. He maintained business accounts on the advice of his accountant. He responded fully to discovery requests. He did everything the law requires. His wife's failure to pay attention to their finances doesn't create a legal basis to overturn a settlement agreement." The judges conferred quietly among themselves. Then Judge Castellano said, "We'd like to hear from the parties. Mrs. Chen, please approach." Claire stood. She looked nervous, her hand shaking slightly as she walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, sat down. "Mrs. Chen," Judge Hughes said, her voice gentle but firm, "I want to understand something. You signed tax returns showing your husband's income for 5 years. Why didn't you notice the amounts?" I trusted him. I didn't think I needed to check." "You trusted him to tell you?" "Yes." "Did he ever lie to you about his income?" "He never talked about it. I asked him how work was going and he'd give vague answers. He made it seem like he wasn't making much money." "Did he explicitly tell you he made a certain amount?" Claire paused. "No, but he let me believe it. Mrs. Chen, you work in marketing. You make $95,000 a year. You're an educated, employed woman. Are you telling this court that in 7 years of marriage, you never once looked at your own tax returns? I signed them. I just didn't. I didn't study them. Why not? Because I trusted my husband to handle the finances. Judge Park spoke up.
Mrs. Chen, do you think your husband intentionally hid his income from you?
Claire looked at Derek. He gave her a small nod. She turned back to the judges. Yes, I think he knew I didn't know, and he chose not to tell me. That's the same as hiding it. And there it was. The accusation. The narrative she'd convinced herself of, that I'd been deceptive, manipulative, intentionally keeping her in the dark. Judge Castellano looked at me. Mr. Chen, please approach. I stood, walked to the stand, went through the oath, sat down, very aware of 3 judges watching me, waiting to see if I'd confirm or deny Claire's version of events. Mr. Chen, Judge Castellano said, did you intentionally hide your income from your wife? No, Your Honor. Did she ever ask you directly how much you made? Not in 7 years, Your Honor. Did you tell her? I tried to talk about my work early in the marriage. She wasn't interested. She'd change the subject or check her phone. Eventually, I stopped trying. Why did you maintain separate business accounts? On my accountant's advice, Your Honor. She said it was important to keep business and personal finances separate for tax purposes. It's common practice for self-employed people. Judge Hughes leaned forward. Mr. Chen, I'm going to ask you a difficult question. Looking back, do you wish you'd been more explicit about your income? I thought about that. Really thought about it. Yes, Your Honor. I wish I'd sat Claire down and shown her the accounts and made sure she understood. But I also wish she'd been curious enough to ask. I wish she'd cared enough about what I did to want to know the details. We both failed each other in different ways. Do you think the settlement is fair? I think it's more than fair, Your Honor. She's getting half the house equity, half the joint accounts. She's walking away with over $100,000 from a marriage where she contributed maybe $20,000 to the down payment. If anything, the settlement favors her. Judge Park spoke. Mrs. Chen characterized you as deliberately hiding your income. How do you respond to that? This was it. The moment where I could be diplomatic, measured, careful, or I could be honest. I chose honest. Your Honor, my wife called me a freeloader. Her lawyer, also her boyfriend, nodded in agreement. They filed paperwork suggesting I was deadweight, that I'd contributed nothing to our marriage. They built an entire case around the assumption that she supported me. And then, when they discovered my actual income, when they realized how wrong they were, instead of apologizing or admitting their mistake, they doubled down. They claimed I was deceptive, that I was manipulative, that somehow their ignorance was my fault. I looked directly at Claire. I spent 7 years trying to be enough for you, trying to be successful in a way you'd respect. And the whole time, I already was. I already had the success. I already had the career. I already had everything you thought you wanted. You just never bothered to look. The courtroom was silent. Claire's face was red, tears streaming down her cheeks. Derek was staring at his notepad. Patricia had a small, satisfied smile. Judge Castellano cleared his throat. Mr. Chen, you can step down. I returned to my seat, heart pounding. The judges conferred for a moment. Then Judge Castellano spoke. We've heard enough. We'll issue a written decision within 30 days, but I can tell you now which way we're leaning. Mr. Bradford, your appeal is frivolous. Judge Martinez made the right call. Your client signed a valid settlement agreement after receiving proper disclosure. The fact that she didn't pay attention to her own financial situation is not grounds to overturn that agreement. He looked at Claire. Mrs. Chen, I understand you're disappointed, but you're an adult. You signed documents. You made choices. You're going to have to live with the consequences. The gavel came down. We're adjourned. End quote. And just like that, it was over. Really, truly, finally over. Derek looked stunned. Claire was crying openly. Patricia was packing up her briefcase with the air of someone who just won exactly what she expected to win. I just sat there, feeling lighter than I'd felt in months. The truth had been spoken, the accusation had been answered, and 3 judges had looked at all the evidence and said, "You're right. She's wrong. Case closed." We walked out of the courtroom into the January cold. Snow was falling, soft and silent. "Well," Patricia said, That's that. I agreed. "How do you feel?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Free," I said finally. "I feel free." She smiled. "Good. You deserve it. Go home, Michael. Go live your life. This part is over." I drove home through the snow, watching the city transform into something clean and white and new. And I thought about beginnings and endings, and the strange relief of finally being done with something you've been carrying for too long. The divorce would finalize in a few months. The paperwork would process. One day, I'd receive a document that said I was officially single again. But the real ending, the one that mattered, had just happened in that courtroom, when I'd finally told the truth about what this had cost me. What Claire had cost me. And 3 judges had listened, and they'd believed me. And that, I thought, driving through the snow toward my empty house, was worth more than any settlement amount. That was justice. The laboratory hummed with an otherworldly resonance as Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display floating before her. The quantum entanglement pattern she'd been tracking for 3 months had suddenly coalesced into something impossible, a message embedded in the fabric of space-time itself. "Marcus, you need to see this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the whir of cooling fans surrounding the quantum processors. Dr. Marcus Webb approached, his coffee forgotten, on the nearby workstation. The hologram displayed what appeared to be a mathematical proof, but unlike anything either of them had encountered in their combined 40 years of theoretical physics research. The equations seemed to fold into themselves, creating recursive loops that somehow remained internally consistent despite violating several fundamental laws of quantum mechanics. That can't be natural," Marcus breathed, his fingers tracing through the air as if he could physically touch the floating symbols. "Someone engineered this. But who has the capability to manipulate quantum states at this scale?" Sarah pulled up the temporal analysis she'd been running in parallel. "Look at the timestamp data. These patterns didn't originate from our present. They're coming from approximately 47 years in the future, give or take 3 days, accounting for quantum uncertainty. The implications crashed over them like a tidal wave. Their research facility, buried 300 meters beneath the Swiss Alps, was supposedly the most advanced quantum computing laboratory on Earth. Yet someone or something from the future had reached back through time to leave them a message using technology that shouldn't exist for half a century." Marcus began decoding the mathematical structures, his augmented reality glasses projecting supplementary calculations across his field of vision. "It's a warning," he said after several minutes of intense analysis. "They're telling us that our current experimental protocol will trigger a cascade failure in the quantum foam underlying local spacetime. If we proceed with tomorrow's scheduled test, we'll create a permanent tear in reality." "How permanent are we talking?" Sarah asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Complete breakdown of causality within a 50-kilometer radius. Time would cease to flow linearly. Past, present, and future would exist simultaneously. Anyone caught in the affected zone would experience every moment of their existence at once, birth, death, and everything between, all compressed into a single eternal instant." Sarah felt her blood run cold. The test scheduled for tomorrow morning was designed to achieve stable quantum entanglement across macroscopic distances, a breakthrough that would revolutionize everything from computing to telecommunications. The European Union had invested 12 billion euros in the project. World leaders were expecting results. The Nobel Committee had already been quietly notified. "We have to shut it down," she said, reaching for the emergency protocol terminal. Marcus grabbed her wrist. "Wait. Think about what you're doing. We have no proof this message is genuine. It could be a hoax, sabotage from a competing research team. The Chinese Quantum Initiative has been desperately trying to catch up to us. This could be an elaborate disinformation campaign. You analyzed the mathematics yourself. No one on Earth could fabricate something this sophisticated." "Exactly my point," Marcus countered, his grip tightening. No one on Earth. What if this isn't from humans at all? What if there's something else out there? Something that doesn't want us to achieve quantum supremacy because it threatens their existence or their plans. Sarah yanked her hand free, her mind racing through the possibilities. Marcus had a point. The message could be authentic, but deceptive. A future entity trying to prevent humanity's advancement for its own purposes. Or it could be exactly what it appeared to be, a desperate warning from their own descendants trying to prevent a catastrophe. We need more data, she decided, moving to the secondary analysis station. Let me run a deep scan on the quantum signature patterns. If this really originated from our future timeline, there should be trace elements of our own laboratory's quantum fingerprint embedded in the message structure. For the next 6 hours, they worked in focused silence, running simulation after simulation. Sarah's algorithms peeled back layers of the mysterious transmission, revealing increasingly complex patterns. The deeper she dug, the more convinced she became that the message was genuine. But something else emerged from the data, something that changed everything. Marcus, she said slowly, I found something. The message isn't just a warning, it's a complete technical schematic for preventing the cascade failure. They're not telling us to abandon the project, they're telling us how to fix it. Look at this subsection. It's a modification to our quantum stabilization field generators. If we implement these changes, we can achieve stable entanglement without tearing space-time. Marcus studied the specifications with growing excitement. This is brilliant. These modifications would actually improve our results by an order of magnitude. But why not just send us the fix? Why the dramatic warning? Sarah pulled up the temporal analysis again, and suddenly it all made sense. Because they needed us to find it ourselves. Look at the timeline branches. If we'd simply received instructions without understanding the danger, we might have implemented them incorrectly. The fear, the urgency was necessary to ensure we'd take this seriously enough to get it right. They spent the rest of the night implementing the modifications, racing against their scheduled test time. As dawn broke over the Alps, casting golden light across the mountain peaks invisible from their underground facility, Sarah initiated the final calibration sequence. The quantum processors hummed to life, their entangled particles dancing in perfect synchronization. The readings were flawless. They'd done it, achieved stable macroscopic quantum entanglement without catastrophic side effects. But as Sarah watched the success metrics scroll across her display, a new message appeared in the quantum data stream. Just 3 words, but they sent chills down her spine. Now, trust us. The hologram expanded, revealing blueprints for technologies that would take humanity to the stars. The quantum conspiracy had only just begun. The blueprints materialized across every display in the laboratory, transforming the sterile white walls into a cathedral of shimmering data. Dr. Sarah Chen stood motionless at the center of the quantum chamber, her breath forming small clouds in the supercooled air. The 3 words still haunted her. Now trust us. Marcus had collapsed into a chair, his augmented reality glasses pushed up onto his forehead, his eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and terror. Sarah, he whispered, do you understand what we're looking at? These aren't just incremental advances. This is a complete technological revolution, faster than light communication. 0-point energy extraction, consciousness transfer protocols, medical nanobots that could eliminate disease. They've given us everything. Sarah approached the central hologram, her hands trembling as she manipulated the 3-dimensional schematics. Each design was meticulously detailed, accompanied by mathematical proofs that would take teams of scientists years to fully verify. Yet even at a glance, she could see the elegant logic underlying each concept. These weren't fantasies or theoretical speculation. They were complete functional designs ready for implementation. Why? She asked the empty air, knowing the quantum transmission could potentially carry her question back to its mysterious source. Why give us all of this now? What do you want from us? The response came immediately. Text scrolling across the holographic interface in a font that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Because in 47 years, We will face an existential threat that we cannot defeat alone. We need you, our past selves, to build the foundation that will save humanity. Every technology we send you serves a purpose. Every blueprint is a piece of a larger puzzle. You must begin construction immediately. Time is not as linear as you believe, and the enemy is already moving against us across multiple timelines. Enemy? Marcus stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. What enemy? What kind of threat requires technology from the future to defeat? The hologram shifted, displaying what appeared to be astronomical data. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the patterns, but they were wrong. Impossibly wrong. The data showed Earth's solar system, but with orbital mechanics that violated every law of physics she understood. The harvesters. They exist outside conventional space-time, moving through the quantum foam itself. They consume civilizations at the moment of their greatest technological achievement, specifically when they achieve stable quantum entanglement across macroscopic distances. You succeeded 4 hours ago. They are already aware of you. They are coming. Sarah felt the room spinning around her. That's why the original timeline failed. We triggered the cascade not because of a flaw in our equipment, but because they attacked us. The temporal tear wasn't an accident, it was a weapon. Correct. In the original timeline, the harvesters arrived 6 hours after your successful test. They shredded the quantum fabric of your reality, causing a cascade that spread outward at the speed of light. Within 3 days, all of Earth was consumed. Within a year, the entire solar system ceased to exist in any meaningful way. We are the survivors who escaped before the final collapse, and we have been working for 47 years to change that outcome. Marcus paced frantically, his mind clearly racing through implications and possibilities. But if they attack when civilizations achieve quantum entanglement, and we've already achieved it, how does giving us advanced technology help? Won't that just make us a bigger target? You misunderstand the nature of the threat. The harvesters are not interested in destruction for its own sake. They feed on the quantum potential of emerging civilizations, the probability waves of what you might become. Once you achieve certain technological thresholds, you become useless to them. They can only harvest potential, not actualized power. We are giving you the tools to evolve beyond their feeding range. Sarah studied the blueprints again with new understanding. Each technology wasn't just an advancement, it was a shield, a weapon, a survival tool. The faster-than-light communication would allow humanity to coordinate across vast distances, preventing the harvesters from isolating and consuming populations. The zero-point energy extraction would make Earth independent of vulnerable infrastructure. The consciousness transfer protocols would ensure that even if bodies were destroyed, human minds could survive. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Approximately 72 hours until the first harvester scouts arrive. They will probe your defenses, test your responses. The main force will arrive 6 days after that. You must begin construction of the primary defense grid within the next 12 hours, or the timeline branches toward extinction with probability exceeding 99%. "That's impossible," Marcus protested. "Even with complete blueprints, building something like this requires resources, facilities, manpower. We can't just conjure a planetary defense system out of thin air in 12 hours. The hologram shifted again, displaying real-time satellite imagery of locations across the globe. Sarah recognized military installations, research facilities, private aerospace companies, and government laboratories. At each location, quantum signatures pulsed with the same pattern she'd been tracking for months. "You are not alone. We have been preparing other teams simultaneously. 73 research facilities across the planet are receiving this transmission right now. Each has been given different pieces of the puzzle, technologies that complement each other, systems that interconnect. The Chinese quantum initiative you feared was competition? They are receiving the consciousness transfer protocols. The American military research complex? They are getting the weapons systems. The European Space Agency? They are being sent the faster-than-light communication arrays. None of you can succeed alone, but together, you form a complete defense network." Sarah felt a laugh bubbling up in her throat, edged with hysteria. You're forcing humanity to cooperate or die. You're weaponizing our survival instinct. We are giving you a chance. In every timeline we have observed, humanity's tribalism and competition leads to your extinction. The harvesters exploit your divisions, turning your greatest strength, diversity of thought, and approach into your greatest weakness. This is the only scenario where cooperation emerges fast enough to matter. Marcus had accessed his personal terminal and was pulling up global news feeds. Sarah, look at this. Reports are coming in from research facilities worldwide. Quantum anomalies, mysterious transmissions, scientists claiming contact with the future. The media is calling it mass hysteria, but the scientific community is mobilizing. I'm seeing coordination happening in real time. The holographic display expanded to show a network diagram of unprecedented complexity. Nodes representing research facilities began connecting, forming a web that spanned the entire planet. As Sarah watched, the connections strengthened. Data flowing between locations at speeds that should have been impossible with current technology. Your quantum processors are now entangled with every other facility in the network. You are sharing processing power, research data, and consciousness bandwidth across the entire planet. You have become, effectively, a single distributed intelligence. This is your first defense against the harvesters. They cannot consume what they cannot isolate. Sarah felt a strange sensation, like her thoughts were expanding beyond the confines of her skull. Suddenly, she was aware of other minds, thousands of them all working on different aspects of the same problem. She could sense Dr. Lu Wei in Beijing, wrestling with the mathematics of consciousness transfer. She felt the presence of Colonel Sarah Martinez at DARPA, coordinating weapons development. She experienced the wonder of Dr. Yuki Tanaka in Tokyo, who had just solved a critical problem in zero-point energy extraction. We're becoming something new, she breathed, tears streaming down her face. We're evolving. Yes, this is why the harvesters fear you, not for what you are, but for what you can become. In 47 years, we will no longer be merely human. We will be something the universe has never seen before, a species that transcended its limitations and rewrote the rules of existence itself. But first, you must survive the next 10 days. Marcus gripped Sarah's hand, and through their entangled consciousness, she felt his fear, his determination, and his absolute commitment to seeing this through. Across the planet, billions of humans were about to discover that they were not alone in the universe, and that their response to that discovery would determine whether humanity had a future at all. The quantum processors hummed louder, and Sarah Chen, physicist and accidental savior of mankind, began to build tomorrow's world with blueprints from yesterday's future. The architects of tomorrow had begun their greatest work, and the clock was ticking.